This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Why are we upset if we're creating jobs?
Inflation is still a thing out there for the everyday consumer.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
The economic calendar jam-packed today.
And Michael Barr with news. Tensions between the U.S. and China have heated up even more. The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr on assignment. Is he scheduled for Monday?
I think so.
Like a sighting on Monday?
Exactly. He's up in Napa now this weekend. Yeah,
Lisa Mateo with us as well, and John Tucker helping out this morning. We welcome you for 3 hours of festivities. Friday, slide into an almost summer, perfect weather weekend. Not. Things changed, and we're going to talk about it here in a moment. The whole Fed Watch thing for next week, September 18th, radically changed in the last 12 hours. That'll be our lead feel here today. It folds into equities, bonds, currencies, commodities, maybe even folds into the election. Futures up 13, Dow futures up 81, NASDAQ on a percentage basis, not so good, but the VIX under 17, 16.86 shows it as well. Paul, what are you looking at on the screen this morning besides the 30-year mortgage?
Exactly right. The 2-year Treasury off about 5 basis points here, Tom. The 2 years down to 3.58%.
Yeah.
It wasn't that long ago that we were looking at 5% on a 2-year Treasury. That you could build a career on 5%. We're now down to 3.58%.
Yen made a dash to a stronger yen, 140 down to 139, a richer, stronger yen.
Yep.
Didn't get there,
Wow.
but that's something to watch as well. Just a whole lot going on. We welcome you on YouTube. After your commute, consider YouTube in your living room, at your office, maybe both. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts. That's the best way to do it on YouTube. Good morning, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. Along the corridor, 99.1 FM Washington. Radio Hager, we're calling it now.
Okay.
Radio
Very
Nathan
good.
Hager.
Player
They won an award last night.
Did
Bloomberg
they?
Daybreak. Yeah,
Wow.
we don't win awards.
No, we don't win, but
Hager, Moscow, they won some,
they're
trophy
professionals down there in Washington.
or whatever. Good morning, our flagship, Bloomberg 1130 in beautiful New York City. In Boston, 92.9 FM. Good morning. From the Interactive Broker Studios, our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
Good morning. Yeah, futures trying to keep up that momentum from yesterday's gains. Right now we have NASDAQ futures up about 0.1%, 17 points. Dow futures up 0.1%, 77 points. S&P futures up 0.2%, or 12 points. The 2-year yield at 3.59%, down 4 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 3.65%, that's down 2 basis points. Two commodities, we have spot gold higher, $2,566 an ounce. We have Brent crude $72 a barrel, WTI crude $69 a barrel. Shares of Boeing down 3%. Its factory workers started their first walkout in 16 years. Then we go to American Airlines. Flight attendants approved a contract that will raise wages as much as 20%, increase pay and benefits by $4.2 billion over 5 years. American Airlines up about 0.5%. Meanwhile, Southwest Airlines flight attendants, well, they got the green light from a federal judge. They're going to move forward in a class action. Claims that their attendance policy change punishes workers who take medical and family leave. Southwest up about 0.2%. And since we're talking airlines, United Airlines, they say a day of investor updates. It was originally scheduled for May, now likely to be put off until the spring of 2025. Well, shares down 0.2%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Greatly appreciate it. Dan Scully with us right now. Working on strategy, working on research with Morgan Stanley's wealth management team.
Yep.
Dan, I think bond types are in a conundrum. I'm bringing up here the Bloomberg Total Return Index. It's a huge, beautiful summary of everything out there. And Dan, I'm looking on a price basis. A blended bond index is off the April lows, a capital gain of 8%, a total return. Is there a point where you get out of fixed income with a gain like that?
Good morning, Tom. So you're definitely right in noting this massive move in bonds. Since the spring, we've come very far, very fast. We had been advocating from a investment committee and from a Morgan Stanley macro level, owning some of the higher quality parts of the bond market. And look, we would say bonds today are more of a hold. We certainly have more question marks related to the outlook in the next 6 months. They're no longer a screaming buy that they were 6 months ago. But they're more of a hold today for sure.
So, Dan, it looks like we've got a Federal Reserve that's about to begin cutting interest rates, and we're not sure to what the cadence will be, the duration of this cuts, and the absolute magnitude of the cuts. All that being said, how are you guys thinking about portfolio construction in a declining interest rate environment?
Good morning, Paul. So, look, I think this is yet another wall of worry, a wall of question marks that the markets need to climb in the coming months. Let's face it, stepping back and thinking about the context of this particular cycle since COVID, since the Fed started raising rates 2 years ago, a lot of nuance and a lot of idiosyncratic niche ideas have really been percolating in the economy, given all the distortion that COVID created. So I don't actually find it that surprising that this is yet another uncertainty that the market's grappling with. To your question, in terms of how do you think about portfolio construction, bonds are still a meaningful part of our allocation. Along the equity spectrum, we think the rotation that you saw starting in the middle of the summer continues, with more tech performance drifting to a broader equal weight and value leadership. And so those are some of the key considerations.
Hey, Dan, I'm just reading through your notes here, and you say that we believe that investors should overweight low vol, dividend yield, and quality value. What does that mean? Like, where does that take you then?
Yeah, excellent question, Paul. So if you think about those different factors, particularly in the first half of the year, they were truly out of favor. As I mentioned a moment ago, they've certainly been starting to make a comeback in the last, call it 2 months. So starting with low vol, right, that takes you to sectors like staples, like healthcare, like utilities. And utilities, as you know, has had this additional boost from the powering AI intersection
Yep.
as well. In terms of quality value, Paul, the genesis behind that call is we don't want to just buy cheap stocks or cheapness in and of itself, because the reality is, in the event that you have a more soft landing vis-a-vis a shallow and steady rate cutting cycle, your endpoint on rates is still going to be vastly higher than it was post '08. And so you still need quality cash flows. You still need enduring pricing. So the idea is to take an extra fundamental layer to your value stock selection.
All right, Dan. So it's interesting here. I mean, a lot of folks are just saying, I don't know what to do vis-a-vis the Magnificent Seven names versus the rest of the market. Do I need to try to get a little smarter and find value out there? Or can I just be, I'm not going to say lazy, but can I be a little bit complacent and just stick with those big tech names?
Yeah, this is a really important question, Paul. So if you go back 18 months ago, you had to have made a big overweight call on the Magnificent Seven, just given how concentrated that leadership was. And, everyone gave them grief about 99 bubble comparisons, but let's face it, they had all the magnificent earnings in the market. Now you're seeing earnings broaden out. So the Magnificent Seven in tech is a third of the market. You really need to treat it with a
Okay.
risk lens, right? I think it's very
Right.
difficult, frankly, to make big underweight
Yeah.
calls or exit calls. So it's likely more of an equal weight position today.
Dan, I want you to talk to Morgan Stanley Wealth Management clients right now. We've had, Paul, you were here. I took one day off this summer, folks, and the
Yep.
VIX went
Oh
to
my
60.
gosh.
I literally, I kid you not.
Can't do that again.
I said, Lisa, take my vacation days. Paul, take my vacation days. So August, Dan, the world blows up. September, Dan, the world blows up. Everybody's heads are spinning. I had maximum gloom last weekend. You know I'm going to get gloom from the gloom crew this Friday. How do people that want to invest, see in this 3-day bull market we've got, how do they process the gloom that's swirling in front of them each and every day?
Tom, I'm about to send you a care package hearing that recap of the summer, but you're right. When you look at what happened over the July, August months, not so
Dan,
relaxing.
I can't take a 1.75. Okay, it's got to be a smaller bottle. Okay, continue.
Tom, not so relaxing summers abound for everyone between yen carry unwind, jobs revisions, a little bit of the steam coming out of AI. The technical and some of these fundamental updates took the markets down the elevator. But I think more conviction around the soft landing has taken the market back up the elevator. And look, we're hearing just this week from Morgan Stanley's industrial conference, we're hosting over 200 companies in California, that the industrial economy remains resilient. So, Tom, to conclude, it's a 3% unsustainable trend from last year, going closer to a 2% trend.
Dan, we got to run. Breaking news. Dan Skelly, Morgan Stanley, thank you so much. Here's what's happened in the last 24 hours away from economics. We've had Ed Hyman, Paul, in with us, 3 days ago, 4 days ago? He capitulated with his team. He said, we don't believe in a hard landing anymore. We have shifted to a soft landing, a non-recession constructive market. In the last 20 minutes, Michael Purvis has published with Tallbacken, and he's made real clear he doesn't see the agony out there. He has raised his SPX call. We are, parentheses, only Purvis uses parentheses, belatedly raising our year-end target 4,800 to 5,800. Joining us now in his early morning, Michael Purvis of Tallbacken. Michael, what changed to get you to gap up 1,000 points?
Well, Tom, actually, when I wrote that 4,800 from last December, I was really pretty constructive at the time.
Yes, you were.
I was being a little bit cautious, and I've been very bullish through the year. The belatedly comment was because with all the August volatility, I was just, it wasn't a change of heart or view. It was simply getting around to getting the upgrade out, if you will. So it was a bit of a mark-to-market. But the important thing here is that look, I've never been in the hard landing camp. I believe we're in a shift to a higher nominal GDP environment, which is going to be pretty constructive for earnings. And the other point that I'm really stressing here is that don't buy. If you're bullish on equities, you got to be bullish on big tech.
Well, that's where I want to go. Okay, but Michael, this is important. Lisa Mateo has 2 kids ordering their iPhone 16 Pro Max whenever this bell switches. There's a sentence in the Purvis note. Michael, I got 1 minute. Big tech will keep driving the bus. Discuss.
Well, what that means is that the earnings growth from the big tech, call it Mag 6, Mag 7, whatever you want, that earnings growth is very superior. But in addition, and superior not just in terms of the quantity, but also in terms of the stability and the predictability. Nvidia is a little bit of a footnote there. Yeah. The second thing is that if you look at the price earnings to growth ratios, right? In other words, yeah, sure, PEs are higher for big tech, but if you look at them adjusted for growth, they're less than half what they are for the what we call the everything else of the market. In this case, I'm using the SPX equal weight as a proxy there, right? So it's actually a very reasonably priced growth there. Sometimes it gets overextended, certainly there. But if you really think that the rotation is going to be where you want to stay for the next 6 to 12 months, you're going to be with a much smaller equity rally.
Michael, you're a trooper. I mean, he's up there. The leaves have already changed. He's up with Henry Fonda, Jane Fonda, Squam Lake. They're like doing the whole New Hampshire thing. The leaves have changed and that. Michael Purvis, too early in the New Hampshire morning. Thank you so much. Mr. Purvis goes from 4,800 up to 5,800 on an SPX call, and we saw Ed Hyman's team at Evercore ISI with a more optimistic tone. We got Anurag on later. I mean, is Tucker ordering a new iPhone today?
No, of course not. Please.
No,
Existing one works just fine.
Fine. It's been there for 10 years. We're comfortable. Futures up 10. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this Bloomberg Business Flash brought to you by Interactive Brokers Portfolio Analyst. Consolidate and analyze all your financial accounts on one powerful dashboard for free. Sign up for Portfolio Analyst at ibkr.com/free PA. All right, futures are in the green. Fresh U.S. data kept investors guessing on the size of an expected rate cut from the Federal Reserve. Former Fed official Bill Dudley said there's, quote, a strong case for a 50 basis point cut next week. Today, more economic data. We have a read on import prices for August at 8:30 Wall Street time, and sentiment comes in after the open. So we have NASDAQ futures, little change, up about half a point. Dow futures up 0.1%, 49 points. S&P futures up 0.1%, or 8 points. The 2-year yield at 3.59%, down 5 basis points. A yield on the 10-year 3.65%, down 2 basis points. To earnings we go. Adobe down 8% after its revenue forecast failed to reflect an AI uplift. But on the flip side, you have Oracle up 6%. Investors cheered its long-term sales targets. And finally, OpenAI. It's released a new AI model. It can perform some human-like reasoning tasks. Should be able to solve multi-step problems like complicated math and coding questions.
Oh, it's good to know.
For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. That's a Bloomberg Business.
Can we have some AI chat GPT that can get a 17-year-old to empty the dishwasher? That's all I want.
Exactly.
It didn't happen yesterday. I'm looking for artificial intelligence. Empty the dishwasher. 8 excuses. Why not? Futures up 9 right now. Really, really interesting Friday, folks. And of course, the litmus paper of the system, the deepest part of the system, is our foreign exchange. Dollar churning a little bit stronger over the last number of days, but yen almost to a 139 today. Joining us now from Barclays, London, the pride of St. Andrews. Do you know how many kids are applying to St. Andrews this year?
A lot of American kids go there.
Skylar Montgomery Cunning went there. They're like, we got to go there. Oh, yeah, what was that other couple that went there? Prince and Duchess of that.
That's right, yep.
Joining us now, Duchess Montgomery Cunning of Barclays as well at foreign exchange. Skylar, were you there at St. Andrews when they were there?
No, I wasn't. Maybe telling to my age or not, but I came after them.
You came after them, okay. But you went to the coffee shop, the red coffee shop, where they said this is the first place.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Which one? There are several that they say are the first place.
Okay, very good. There are also several reasons why we're calling for dollar weakness. Is Barclays on the idea of dollar weakness due to Fed cuts?
Yeah, that's part of it. Mostly essentially we're actually more cautious near term, but we're more bullish longer term. So FX, what you've seen essentially, it's only been trading the Fed easing cycle with more dovishness seen as a detriment to the dollar. And as the market figures out the extent of the economic weakness in the US, you could potentially see more dovishness priced in, and that definitely would weigh on the dollar. But the room seems very limited if you think we're heading for a soft landing, right? So the market already prices a terminal rate below 3%. If we were to price significantly lower than that, it implies that the Fed is easing and a hard landing, which the dollar would likely gain on from safe haven flows. And historically, what you actually see is that on average, the dollar does weaken into the first cut of the cycle, but the depreciation we've already seen is larger than the historical averages. And post the first cut, the dollar tends to gain as the market realizes the growth scare is a scare. And the other consistent theme, which I think is important, is that across past soft landings, the market overprices the amount of easing that is eventually delivered. So when that overpriced easing comes out, the dollar should rally. But certainly in the near term, there are still downside risks there.
So, Skylar, one of the things Thomas is mentioning, the yen here, strengthening today to down to 140.7. What's going on with the yen? What is the Barclays call on the Japanese yen?
Yeah, sure. So the yen has been bid lately on risk aversion. And if we do get a recession, I would expect the yen to rally versus the dollar. And I'd actually expect it to be, broadly an outperformer overall. But that's not our base case. And I also don't think it's the markets. I don't think quite a lot of consensus or even market pricing indicates a recession outcome. And we think a large portion of short-term yen carry trades have been unwound. So dollar yen now looks more in line with rate differentials. It makes the scope for further yen strength limited. And our dollar forecast or dollar yen forecast is for to rise into 2025. But there's no doubt that the Bank of Japan has made a hawkish turn. So we like yen, but on the crosses. One example being versus Swiss. Just given our dollar view, it's a little bit more tenuous there.
Paul, moments ago, Torsten Slok playing off Skylar Montgomery Koenig. Torsten Slok saying foreign demand for U.S. credit. Here's the key phrase: near all-time highs. Dr. Slok at Apollo.
Yeah, very interesting. So it's interesting, Skylar. So if the dollar's maybe got a little bit of weakness near term, but longer term, not so much, where do you find value in the currency markets today? Is there any trade that kind of jumps out at you?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I kind of alluded to, we really like being short Swiss versus yen. That's carry efficient. It's a hard landing hedge. And I also think the risk reward is attractive. I mean, as I said, the Bank of Japan is clearly on a hawkish path relative to the rest of G10. And we actually have a more hawkish forecast for them than consensus as well as the market. And we've had these rounds of appreciation in recent weeks on the growth scares out of the US. On the other hand, Swiss is too strong. Inflation is quite low in Switzerland. The S&P has a bias for a weaker currency, and they worry about export competitiveness. And I think, the next step, if they can't get the currency down with interest rate cuts, is intervention.
Well, Skylar, let me dovetail like four emotions here, starting with Swiss franc and the idea of deflation or disinflation. There's a small matter of China. I got Torsten Slok saying demand for U.S. credit is near all-time highs. At Barclays, are you looking at a rate study or are you looking at a flow study into 2025?
In terms of China or in terms of the outlook?
Everything. Off the Barclays desk, off the Barclays desk in London, which is just like they do it at a Starbucks over there. But Skylar, to me, the whole question is it about big money flows coming up, or is it about rate differentials?
Yeah, I think we're largely thinking about it being rate differentials. I mean, if you think about the U.S., you've had a strong dollar because you've had these large inflows, but they're kind of stuck, right? The U.S. has been outperforming, and you've had these inflows because U.S. equities, U.S. markets generally have outperformed the rest of the world, and I don't think that changes. So that flow doesn't change. The interest rate differential is what we think needs to change. I think there's too much dovish priced in the U.S., and when that comes out, you'll see some dollar strength.
Skylar Montgomery Koenig, thank you so much to Barclays. When you do your first junket to New York City for the shop, Skylar, darken the door here. We'd love to see you at our world headquarters this morning. I'm going to get you the exact time, folks. The great thing about what Paul and I see, like somebody goes, "Did you get my email?" And I'm like, "Are you kidding me? There's like 10,000. And the answer is this morning, I can tell you exactly, it's 6:00. Anna Wong and Estelle O published, and they said really clear, CPI and PPI lead you to a September 27th core PCE deflator where 50 basis points is back in play.
Really?
The meeting is before September 27th. My people said the Fed decides. I didn't know it. September 18th, we're doing that. And the answer, folks, is you say, how did we get to this frenzy of bull market tone in the last 2 days? It is about earnings, Paul. It's Gina Martin Adams, Cam Dawson, double-digit earnings. But what it's really about is a legit study of a 50 basis point cut. I would not have said that 48 hours ago.
No, I would not. I mean, I kind of thought that some of the recent economic data that we had kind of took 50 off the table. But I mean, a lot of folks that think long-term, Barry Ritholtz, for example, that thinks long-term says, don't worry about 25 or 50 basis points. The fact is the Fed is in an easing cycle. Rates are coming down. That is kind of going to inform your argument. And quite frankly, on September 27th, I'm going to be in Limerick, Ireland. I could care less what happens.
Yeah, and your airfare was cheaper than it would have been a year ago.
You're very true, Tom.
Anna Wong, PPI airfare prices is something they're looking at. Business inflation, airfare prices are lower, so that's why Sweeney's going home to the motherland. As well. How do you get to Limerick from Dublin?
We go Dublin up to Belfast, over to Kerry, and then come down the western coast of Ireland. So we're doing the whole thing. You could do Ireland in like 15 minutes. It's like Wisconsin. That's kind of what I feel.
Did you look at the real estate prices in Dublin?
No.
They're like the most expensive
Are they
in the
really?
world.
Yeah,
They're insane.
Are you going there for the weather? I mean, what are you doing?
I love Ireland.
When
do I get a life? When do I go to Ireland? Bloomberg Surveillance, coast to coast. Good morning on YouTube.
Breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures in the green. This is as investors place their bets on the size of rate cuts from the Fed next week. According to economists surveyed by Bloomberg News, policymakers likely to lower interest rates by a quarter point next week at each of the two meetings that follow. Right now, we have NASDAQ futures, little change up about 12 points. Dow futures up 0.1%, 63 points. S&P futures up 0.2%, or 11 points. We have the two-year yield at 3.59%, down 4 basis points. A yield on the 10-year 3.65%, and that's down 2 basis points. To currencies, the dollar weaker. Japanese yen up 0.7% at 140.80 against the dollar. The euro stronger. British pound weaker. We have Bitcoin Down at about 58,000. Companies making news, that would be Amazon. It plans to spend an additional $2.1 billion on its contract delivery unit. That includes safety programs, training, also pay raise to almost $22 an hour. Amazon shares little change. And 4,800 people working at Verizon, well, they took up the company's offer to walk away in exchange for a severance package, and that's going to cost Verizon about $1.9 billion. Their shares little change. And Cox Communications cutting hundreds of workers, about 5% of its staff. Revenue and cable TV phone service declines. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Let's do that right now quickly, Paul. I mean, now is the time. They've got to start right-sizing this media debacle.
And Cox Communications, a privately held company.
Who are they?
The Cox family. Cox family has been in media for really more than a century. Radio, television, magazines, cable television, satellites. Privately held company. I've tried to take them public a million times. I took their radio company public, Cox Radio, back in the day. They were good. But again, you're right, Tom. They're in a business that's just seen this incredible change. People are just cutting the cord on their cable.
I look at streaming, and it's the most confusing thing I've ever seen now.
Yeah,
I can get this on Apple, that
I just
on Amazon.
cut everything.
Lost.
Recently I just went into my little phone thing. I just nuked everything.
Yeah.
Except for Netflix.
Let us continue the discussion here. This is not a normal Friday. It is perfect weather in New York City. Good morning, Bloomberg 11:30 a.m. New York. Sweeney's here on a Friday, which is extraordinary. I was shocked when I came in this morning. Futures up 12. The VIX 16.90. We need to piece it together. At Moneta Group is Ethan Devitt. She is absolutely extraordinary. Coming off, she's hung over from a 40th birthday party thing.
Oh, okay.
I think she tipped 39 or 40, and she's
good.
with us this morning. Ethan, happy birthday. Congratulations and all that. You have such a holistic background. And, of course, from the venue of Ireland and London is different than America. Ethan, are we beyond the pandemic?
What, in terms of our recovery from economic conditions?
Economics, society, debt buildup. I mean, is it a great misjudgment that we're back to normal and back to prosperity?
We're not back to normal yet. As long as we are still spending excess savings, and that's what's happening in the U.S. And I should thank you, as it wasn't actually my 40th last night, but I'm going to take an extra decade if you're willing to give it
It's
to me.
okay. We do that here. We do that at Surveillance.
The charm is alive and well. But yes, as long as the excess spending is still there and is being spent down, which we're still seeing, because we know that the U.S. consumer is living beyond their means. So it must be coming out of savings or more consumer credit. As long as that is there, we still have the hangover. The pandemic hangover is also a belief that when lower rates go low, they go very low and they stay low for long. Even though we know statistically that's very unlikely to happen, there is still a belief that easing is coming. And as you know, until this 25 basis point cut, it looked like it was even going to be 50 basis points, what people expected.
When you look at your view on America, when you look at the growth estimates from Lagarde and the ECB, can you write a research piece this weekend on moderate or genuine stagflation?
It's interesting. I don't see the inflation part of the stagflation. I do see stagnation, though. And certainly within Europe, there is very little in terms of green shoots. We don't have that same innovation and technology push that we've seen in the US. The inflation, though, I think is fairly confidently in retreat in Europe as it is around the world. There could be spikes. There could be service level spikes. We could see some spikes in energy if we enter winter where we have energy shortages or issues like that. But I don't see the inflation part as really kicking us off. The stagnation part, though, that's concerning. Growth is quite anemic, and we haven't had that hard landing. So therefore, there could be these cracks that will start turning into fissures and ultimately will undermine some of these corporates who just can't make ends meet or keep things together.
So, Ethan, given your global strategist remit here, where do you see the best opportunities here as you talk to your clients these days?
It's interesting. As a global strategist, I would obviously be always biased towards a global approach, but that has been an increasingly difficult position to defend recently, as the UK has been the juggernaut, the engine of market growth, and continues to hold that position. I would say that it is important, though, to maintain the global exposure simply because his history would suggest that there is a reversion to the mean, that there are these pockets of growth that are perhaps being underpriced by markets. And you do get that benefit of the currency differential when we see a weaker dollar as we have today. And we know that areas like Japan can have these breakout rallies, which will reflect fundamentals, but can come from nowhere. And you want to be well diversified so that you're in a position to take advantage of that. I will say that with the US election, that is really dominating all outlooks at the moment, because this is not just a domestic election. This is an election that will have serious implications for trading partners around the world, particularly China and Europe. So in a way, this cloud of uncertainty that is sitting around many US investors today has already, I think, contaminated other investors around the world. And I think for the next 60 odd days, there will be a hesitance around putting on risk positions, because we just don't know which way this will go.
So, I mean, I guess one of the questions here for a lot of folks is, stocks, bonds, and, the 60-40 portfolio. And we've actually had some positive returns this year in fixed income. So how do you think about fixed income in a portfolio these days in terms of weightings?
It's interesting. We say, would you start from here? And if you were to start from here in fixed income, you're getting a very decent yield. We know the direction of rates is likely to be downwards, and that will be a nice tailwind for fixed income. As far as how much to allocate to fixed income, this is varied. Around about the time when rates were close to zero, it was really there as a ballast, as a deflation hedge. In institutional portfolios, it was as low as 5%. It wasn't at 40%. And very rare, even among private wealth clients, to see fixed income at 40%. We had 80-year-old clients that were quite keen to have 80% in equities. They did not reflect the typical profile. What would I put in fixed income today? Probably about 15%, 20%. Yes, the yield is attractive, but you have to capture growth, and you're not going to get growth in a fixed income environment. Ultimately, we don't see the major upside in bonds, but it is an important source of income. And as I said, that deflation.
Hey, Finn, one final question. I've got to go to you on this. I went to the Irish Times to get really, really good perspective on Apple owing $13 cajillion to the EU. I guess it's escrowed in bonds right now. I guess it's a drop in the bucket for Apple in that. What is the ramification for the people of Ireland from a new tax policy required in the nation versus the other EU countries?
Well, first, let's talk about that Apple windfall, if it is one. Yes, you said a drop in the ocean for Apple, but would it be a major windfall and could be the source of a sovereign wealth fund in Ireland? It could be used in a way that would benefit generations to come. So certainly very impactful in that way. Yes, Ireland has benefited from its tax policy. If there was more of a normalization versus other EU, there may not be the attractiveness, relative terms, of it as a base. But Ireland, and I'm a product of this, has an excellent education system, a highly educated workforce, and it is very commercial in how it attracts multinationals. So I think that even if the tax system is tweaked, that ecosystem is going to remain extremely attractive on the edge of Europe there.
Ethan, thank you so much. Ethan Devitt with us, with Moneta, just fabulous, really giant holistic perspective as well. Peter, thank you so much for listening. Got a lovely note here from Peter. Paul, this time of year, just now beginning, the drive from Medfield, Massachusetts to Wellesley, you go through Dover, is like a movie set. There's no other way to put it. It is an extraordinary drive for the woods of central New England. Thank you, I should say central Boston, up Center Street, then Central Avenue, and then you go along the Charles River there. It's just a really extraordinary way to get into Boston from Medfield south north through Dover to Wellesley. We say good morning to all of you, including Peter on 92.9 FM. Just the first results we have from this experiment across all of New England with the huge signal of 92.9 FM has been very gratifying. We say again, good morning to all of you there. When you get to the office, consider Paul Sweeney and Lisa Mateo on YouTube. You subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts on YouTube, growing and building every day. Mrs. Keene was watching YouTube and said John Tucker just looks so good.
Oh, fantastic.
Tanned and rested.
I know where you're going with this, and don't get involved because I'm not interested. I can feel that she's trying to set me up.
Mrs.
I can feel
Keene would do that?
Yes, she would.
Yes, you're right.
I'm not a willing participant.
With our news in New York City, a non-willing participant, John Tucker.
It's all a big conspiracy. Anyway, we're leading off with this story. For the first time in 16 years, factory workers have walked off the job at Boeing. Members of the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, representing 33,000 Boeing employees across the West Coast, voted overwhelmingly to strike. Will there be another debate between former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris? Bloomberg's Amy Morris tells us we have a pretty good indication now it is not going to happen.
Donald Trump ruled out another debate with an all-caps declaration on Truth Social. Quote, "There will be no third debate." He insists he won their first debate, so he doesn't need to participate in another one. Vice President Kamala Harris spoke at a campaign event in Charlotte, North Carolina, shortly after Trump's statement.
I believe we owe it to the voters to have another debate.
It is not clear if the vice president was directly responding to Trump's post. Trump and Harris's running mates, Republican Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio and Democratic Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, are slated to hold their own debate on October 1st with CBS News. In Washington, Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
And UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has arrived in Washington ahead of a meeting with President Biden. Sources telling Bloomberg the U.S. and UK discussing allowing Kyiv to conduct strikes inside Russia using British cruise missiles backed by U.S. navigational data. Well, speaking yesterday, the Russian President Vladimir Putin warned against the move.
This will be their direct participation, and this, of course, will significantly change the very essence, the very nature of the conflict. This will mean that NATO countries, the US, and European countries are at war with Russia.
Putin there through an interpreter. The discussion comes after the U.S. confirmed that Moscow has received shipments of ballistic missiles from Iran. And crews continue battling 3 wildfires east of Los Angeles. In San Bernardino County, there's a red glow in the sky, a strong haze in the air as the flames continue to consume the area. The 3 fires have scorched more than 100,000 acres. And after a hack last year at Clorox halted production at U.S. factories and led to shortages of its popular line of Fresh Step cat litter, the company is realizing that some cats have moved on. The cat litter will be Clorox's toughest category, likely to take the longest to recover from the pandemic, from the disruptions. Sales for Clorox brands like Fresh Step and Scoop Away shrank about 4% the year ended June. The business saw pretty strong demand during the pandemic. When contacted for comment, the co-founder of Cat Behavior Alliance, Linda Hall, I don't know what the hell that is, says cats hate change. There's a problem getting Kitty back to the Clorox brand litter. So,
where you find these, I don't know.
You think I make this up? This actually happens.
Can you walk a cat? I've never seen this. Where I am,
there's a guy
can you like
in Manhattan.
Leash and walk a cat?
There's a guy on the Upper West Side who walks the streets with his cat on his shoulder.
That's I get.
Rich, help me. Wake up in the control room. Can you walk a cat like with a leash?
No, they will have a fit. They will have a fit.
Depends on cat.
Crazy beast.
Anyway, that's your news for now.
Thank you, John Tucker.
Taylor Swift is a cat woman, right? And so is.
You're getting political there. Okay.
A childless.
From New York City, Bloomberg surveillance.
And now look at some of the local headlines making news in the tri-state. New York City Police Commissioner Edward Caban has resigned after a little more than a year running the biggest U.S. police force. This comes amid a federal investigation that led to agents searching his home. In a message to the police department on Thursday that was seen by
24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Little movement in futures after wins across the averages of more than half to 1%. Right now we have NASDAQ futures, little change, up about 5 points. Dow futures up 0.1%, 59 points. S&P futures up 0.1%, or 9 points. The 2-year yield at 3.59%, down 4 basis points. The yield on the 10-year at 3.65%, and that's down 2 basis points. To commodities, we have spot gold higher, $2,565 an ounce. Brent crude $72 a barrel. WTI crude $69 a barrel. Moving the markets, furniture retailer Restoration Hardware up 22%. It said demand picked up last quarter, lifting revenues, adjusted earnings above estimates. And then you have shares of Moderna down 4%. Following yesterday's sell-off and unveiling of a cost-cutting plan really failed to reassure investors. And some news in the music world. The Financial Times says Sony Music in advanced talks to buy Pink Floyd's music rights for about $500 million. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. Just a little football here right now. This is a huge deal. When a famous team loses, pity the people they play next.
Ooh.
Can you imagine? This is Purdue, folks. Purdue's playing Notre Dame.
Oh, I see what you're doing with Purdue.
And, we'll do it later here. But the answer is Notre Dame lost to those other guys last week. Huge deal.
Northern Illinois.
And I love what CBS Sports has on this, where there's so much pressure to have Notre Dame ranked and in a bowl game.
Yep, absolutely.
Media.
Yep.
Your world.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely.
Dennis Dodd, thank you for that at CBS Sports. So it's 3 o'clock Saturday
I'll
afternoon.
pay attention to that one.
Notre Dame, Purdue. We'll have to see. They'll give the boiler up.
Yeah.
That's what they'll do. The boiler up.
Now, a look at the front pages. What's making news around the world? Your daily roundup of today's headlines from major publications.
Good morning, everyone. The Daily Look at the Front Page is a Lisa Mateo Hour. It's brought to you by IBKR. Financial advisors switch to Interactive Brokers for lowest cost, global trading and turnkey custody solutions. No ticket charges, no conflicts of your interests. Do that at ibkr.com/RIA. Lisa, what do you have?
All right, so we report on business here, but we also report on politics. We talk about politics here. There's a new poll out from the Associated Press that says, well, Americans, they're getting some political fatigue. They hear too much of it. So some of them want to tune off a little bit. So they're saying about half Americans say they do follow political news extremely, very closely. But 6 in 10 said they have to limit it, how much information they consume, because they feel a bit overloaded. There's a lot of information, right? You get it on your phone. You can see it on social media. People are saying they're having a hard time figuring out what's true, what's not true.
On the debate, they had like 60-some million.
Yep.
People tuned in, more than Biden, Trump.
I kind of like this short little season
Campaign.
that we're having now for
Love
this
it.
election.
It's
It's
British.
kind of like a snap election.
It's British.
Yeah, exactly. We should do this.
I like this.
It's working out for
But
me.
it's a breakdown. Like women more likely to feel that they need to limit it more than men. So that's the difference there. But yeah, a little bit of political fatigue. They're allowed, yes.
We're not in a swing state,
Yeah,
so I
luckily
don't,
we're not in a
don't
swing
see
state
it.
because every single ad on it's just
Oh,
all
it's
day
everywhere.
is
It's everywhere.
Yeah. Next.
Prep schools. I know you love education. So prep schools, not just for the elite. The Wall Street Journal is saying that more are offering free rides for the middle class. So the latest example, Deerfield Academy. It's a Massachusetts boarding school. Yep. It's going to start giving a free ride to any admitted student whose family earns less than $150,000 a year. The school costs $75,000 a year. 48 students paying nothing to attend so far. Wall Street Journal says recruiting diverse students, it really helps get them access to academic, athletic programs to help them get to those elite colleges. And it also helps the wealthier students get exposure to people of different backgrounds as well. But there's other schools that have been doing it for years. You have in New Hampshire, Phillips Academy in New Hampshire, and also Groton School in Massachusetts that has a cap of about $80,000. So more elite schools are starting to do this.
These are the elite schools, and the question is down the food chain. Do they have a luxury to do that? And they maybe don't have the endowments of Groton.
Yeah, exactly right, Tom. You
Phillips
nailed it. It's all about the
or
endowment.
Lawrenceville.
Lawrenceville, we have a $700 million endowment at Lawrenceville, so they're able to be very helpful to a lot of families. So
we'll have to see.
It's a challenge.
Okay, next, what do you got?
Continuing with education, okay? So we heard about the Wall Street Journal's top colleges list, right?
It's about Afterthoughts grades?
We heard, no. Afterthought might like this list. I'm not sure, but This is the school about the best party colleges.
Oh, thank you, Lisa.
Yeah.
Are you taking notes in the
Listen up
car?
after this.
Where's Rutgers? Where's Rutgers?
Rutgers is not on the list, unfortunately. Who do you think's number one? Okay, most of them in the South and the Midwest, they hold those top 14
Okay, I got
spots.
it in my head.
got
Good
one.
morning,
Come on.
French Hill. Good morning, French Hill.
I was thinking Florida. Oh,
Tulane, what a
New
shock.
Orleans.
New
Good
Orleans.
morning, Ian Bremer. Good morning from Party School, New Orleans.
Number one party school, according to the Wall Street Journal. Number two, University of Dayton. They're actually one of two schools
Dayton
in Ohio
Flyers, really?
that made the top 10.
Dennis and the other?
Another private school. When you get to public schools, number three, Florida State University.
Yeah,
Shocked.
now we're talking.
It's on my
Just
daughter's
shocked.
list. I don't know about that now. I'm crossing it off.
right.
Crossing it off. But they did. They surveyed a lot of kids. They asked them about student life, career prep, classroom, dining halls, but they also asked them about the party scene. So if you want to know about Tulane, here it is. 2 out of every 3 students said that they can find a party on campus 5 or more
Nice.
nights
That's
of the
what we're
week
talking about.
if they looked. 40% said that it was true 7 nights a week.
Wow.
So
You know what
they're
school is
going
also
strong.
on the list and is perennially on the list from Mr. Tom Keene? University of Colorado at Boulder.
No.
Yes.
I'm shocked. I'm shocked.
My son's alma mater as well, Boulder, Colorado.
There's a brass plaque at the sink, and we'll leave it there. Do you have one more for us?
I do. This is a record, okay? An American woman has cycled around the
I've
world.
had enough of these people.
Okay.
And you're one of them.
You
Lisa.
do need planes, though, because, you take your
Yeah,
bike, you need
yeah.
the planes. Okay, let's be open about that. 18,000 miles around the world. She's 38 years old, Lael Wilcox, 108 days. That's what it took her to do it. But Guinness laid out these rules. So basically, she hopped on her bike in Chicago in May. She rode east to New York, flew to Portugal, crossed over to Europe, then traveled to Australia, New Zealand, finished with a ride from Anchorage, Alaska, back to Chicago on Wednesday. I can't believe she did all this. She
Very
did
cool.
have a lot of people though going along with her because she was posting on social media where they were going, and they joined in. So
Lisa Mateo with the news today. Thank you, Lisa Mateo. Thanks to Interactive Brokers for that. Just always a whole set of good stories out there. And one of them is in your free time. I mean, Lisa's working like a 28-hour work week.
I know.
I mean, she's
Exactly.
stretching it. She does a couple hours on Sunday
In
to
and
get
out, nothing.
above 25 hours.
Yep.
She did a piece here for Bloomberg Radio on the lack of funding for Latino-owned businesses. And
Okay.
she won an award, Lisa Mateo, folks.
Really?
Trophy taking from the New York State
Crushing it.
Broadcasters, winning an award for Bloomberg Radio. Thank you.
No
I've never
surprise.
won this. They don't even know who I am. They're
Exactly.
Like, Yahoo and a tie. Tell us about this, Lisa.
it was really great, and the reason why I love it is because you just get it from talking with people in the industry. You find out their frustrations, and that's what you do as a journalist.
Right.
You find out you're the voice for the voiceless. So that was my purpose.
Right.
I appreciate the green light that I got to do it in the first place.
Sparta green-lighted it.
Everything. So
Okay.
that was the biggest thing.
Yeah.
It was really great. The problem is that I left the award at Penn Station, and I can't. It's
You lost the award?
I lost the
You
award.
lost the
Well, go to the
Oscar?
Lost and Found today. I'm sure you'll find it. I'm
I
sure
put
they'll
in a
take care of it.
claim. I don't think it's going
Did you
anywhere.
call Mayor
but-
Adams' office?
No, and I'm really upset about
You
it. But
lost
I
your
left
award.
it at Penn Station when I was running to get my train for New Jersey
This was
Transit.
after the third glass of champagne.
Exactly.
At the
That's how it
Emporium.
works.
Oh,
That's how
but
it
I
works.
appreciate
You lost
the honor.
Folks, any of you that see a big brass trophy, gold trophy, I should say, it looks a little bit like an
In the
Emmy
bowels
or
of
an
Penn
Oscar.
Station.
If it's floating in, what's the liquor store there where you buy shots of Tito's?
Oh, it's right there
You know,
on the
it's
main
probably-
floor. And they
probably
have
on their
cups
back.
and they have ice for you. It's
Yeah,
just
well,
the
Lisa
greatest
did
business
that.
ever.
Lisa had it to go at Penn Station after the party. Tito's vodka and ice and left the trophy. on the counter
It
of the
happens.
liquor
It
store.
happens.
Well, thank you.
It's all
Very
part of
good.
commuting.
There's a picture on Twitter in case you want to see what it looks like. I'll put him out on Penn
Lisa
Station.
Mateo, thank you. And of course, complete pro within New York State, New York City
Yep.
broadcasting. Oh, it's college football season. It's in my agreement, folks. Page 43, paragraph 4. I have to play the Purdue fight song
Hail Purdue.
when they play Notre Dame. Good morning, West Lafayette and Harry's Fountain. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
We're addicted to the parlor game, the Fed, the monetary ballet.
Where do you see opportunities in a fixed income space here in 24?
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
AI affecting demand for cloud computing.
And Michael Barr with news.
Another legal setback for Donald Trump, this time across the pond.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Michael Barr on assignment, rumored to be back Monday on the Gulf Stream. Lisa Mateo here, the award-winning Lisa Mateo.
Yes.
Congratulations again. One more time.
But don't entrust her with anything of value.
Friday, the weather, folks, for those of you across the nation, with major regret to the West, where temperatures been terrible fires. Our weather is like perfect. I mean, it's like California. It just sits. There's no wind.
It's perfect.
It's just perfect.
Yep.
And
somebody should be on the beach this weekend.
We should. I mean, I thought like Friday we just slide through it. There's a lot going on. We had a really strong hour talking about more optimism in the markets. Michael Purvis going up to 5,800. Ed Hyman's people looking for a soft landing. Paul, what's your tone on yields? Yields are screaming. September 18th is important for the Fed.
September 18th is important for the Fed, Tom, but the market's already kind of priced it all in here. And we got a 2-year Treasury yield that went from 5% just a cup of coffee ago. We're now below 3.6% on the 2-year Treasury. The Treasury market's saying, we've got you, Fed. Yeah. We know where things are going.
Okay, we're going to get to this right now. We got our conversation of the day in the equity markets with Katy Kaminski coming up. Good morning on YouTube across the nation. As you commute on Apple CarPlay, Android Auto on our 3 stations in the corridor, 99.1 FM Washington, 11:30 a.m. New York. Good morning, 92.9 FM Boston. Remember YouTube, subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast to gaze at the award-winning Lisa Mateo from the Interactive Broker Studios, our Bloomberg Business Flash. Lisa Mateo, we get to speak to her.
Thank you very much. Talk to my people. Futures trying to keep up that momentum from yesterday's gains. Right now we have NASDAQ futures, little change, up about 11 points. Dow futures up 0.1%, 62 points. S&P futures up 0.2%, or 11 points. We have the 2-year yield at 3.59%. That's down 4 basis points. A yield on the 10-year 3.66%, and that's down 1 basis point. To commodities, we have spot gold higher, $2,567 an ounce. Brent crude $72 a barrel. WTI crude $69 a barrel. Shares of Boeing down 4%. We've been talking about it. Its factory workers started their first walkout in 16 years. Over to American Airlines. Flight attendants approved a contract that's going to raise wages as much as 20%, increase pay benefits by $4.2 billion over 5 years. American Airlines up about 0.5%. Meanwhile, you have Southwest Airlines flight attendants. They got the green light from a judge to move forward at this class action. Claims that their attendance policy change punishes workers who take medical and family leave. Southwest up 0.2%. And the Wall Street Journal saying United Airlines, it selected Elon Musk's Starlink service for in-flight internet. United Airlines down about 0.2%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Bloomberg Surveillance this morning and always brought to you by Cohn Resnick Advisory Assurance Tax. Is your business future ready? Talk to Cohn Resnick's digital advisory team about strategies and platforms to drive competitive advantage. Thank you, Cohn Resnick, for your support. From Massachusetts, the Charles River, Katy Kaminski joins, Chief Research Strategist, AlphaSimplex. Katy, have we reaffirmed a bull market? You and I are trend-based. I'm looking at all sorts of percolations, parabolic SAR, Kleinman exponential moving averages, and the vectors pointing up. Do you agree?
I agree on equities, but I'm still really nervous on the other asset classes. So that I'd say yes and no. So.
What's that? That's not a radio answer.
That's economics.
That's a TV. Yeah. You say yes and no on TV. On radio, I need a damn answer.
Yes, I agree for equities. Yes. I mean, I think there's still a moderate and sort of, given what happened last month, signals abated, volatility came in and dissipated some of the strength that we saw earlier this year, and we're going to continue to see some sort of, we've seen some recovery, so we're somewhat moderately long views in equities, but when you look at the other asset classes, that's what's been making me nervous, because you've seen strong fixed income long signals, you've seen short commodity views, you're seeing long gold, and short the dollar's been under pressure too. So that's a little defensive. Still.
You mentioned the dollar, Katie. I mean, again, we've seen weakness here in the dollar here. I mean, I always ask my FX folks here, is there ever a bear case for the U.S. dollar? Is this a bear market for the U.S. dollar, or is this just some short-term trading pressure?
So I think there's definitely a case right now with monetary policy going in with cuts. That's naturally going to put pressure on the dollar, and that's been the key theme for the last 2 or 3 months. And we've seen, I'll just be honest with you, currencies has been the toughest asset class this year to trend, because the signals have been much more volatile. And so you've seen a lot of back and forth, which is not, has not been an easy trend to trade. So the signal to noise ratio has been low. But more recently, especially the last 2 months, definitely with the theme of, U.S. cutting rates, that has put pressure on the dollar.
Katie, from a CTA standpoint, people that follow trends, is it a good time? Are trends efficacious now, or is it what the pros say, folks, it's so stochastic that you just can't get conviction?
I actually think it's a good time, because what happens with trend is as we go through a period of inflection, so when signals reduce and then pivot, and you see positioning move from one theme to another, that's when you have this opportunity to break out. And so what we've been watching is some of the key things that have been building in our signals, and that's been a focus on potential for a harder landing, potential for economic weakness, and that is seen outside of the equity markets. And I think for me, when you look at past reversal periods, those other asset classes is where you have something to, to hedge opportunities if we should find some difficulties this fall.
Do you have a belief on gold? I've never asked you this. Does Katy Kaminski look at gold? I mean, what was it, Paul? Record high yesterday? Where are we? Yeah. 25. We're almost at 2,600 on gold. Catherine Kaminski on gold.
So gold is, it's amazing. I think the recent rally may be attributed to the dollar being weaker and real rates going down. But, really, if you look at that trend, it's just, we should just be buying gold this year. It's been very strong, and it's been very resilient throughout the entire year. So, it's the one that kind of sticks out versus other commodities that are more demand focused, like energies and metals.
Well, I don't know much about commodities. I'm pretty proud of that, by the way. But the function I do know is BCOM, BCO, on the Bloomberg Commodities Index. And boy, that's down 10% just over the summer, I guess. I mean, what's that telling you, Katie?
So that's part of what this defensive narrative that I've been concerned about. It feels a little bit like the trends right now are hedged. So there's still long equity views in trends, but that's coupled with short positioning in commodities. What I'm worried about is what happens after cuts next week. Once we start having cuts, does the market pivot again, or do we continue?
Right. Katie, this has been wonderful. Our theme today, Catherine, is Notre Dame they lost, and in my agreement with Bloomberg, I have to talk of Purdue football. So today we're looking at pro football, like what they play out in South Bend and West Lafayette. I noticed, Katy Kaminski, that the Fighting MIT crew, they beat Bridgewater State in football. And I was looking at Carson Phelps of Wichita, Kansas. I mean, this kid, Katie, he's a math major. He's like MIT. He's like real MIT, like Katie. This kid never knew a B in his life. Katie, is there a fight song at MIT? Is there a fight song?
There actually is, and it's basically a math fight song, and it has like e to the x pi. I wish I remembered it, but
it's got
the MIT
math team, go go go.
Katie,
it's a lot of calculus.
Does it have Euler's function in it with the -1 stuck on the right side?
I think it does. Actually, it does have e to the x, y, cosine, sine, something like that. But look it up. It's really it's a great math chant.
Bronson, Katy Kaminski, thank you so much. From the shores of the Charles River, E to the pi I, or whatever it is. There was somebody who said, I think Einstein said, if you don't understand Euler's function, go home.
Yeah, just
please, you're not for real. Trust me, I went home.
That's table stakes
I
right
didn't
there.
get it. Now joining us, our mathematician with the news from New York City, John Tucker.
All right, good morning. Let's start off with this. Machinists at Boeing voting to go on strike. In a news conference after the vote, Union President John Holden revealed the results.
Our members rejected the contract by 94.6%, and they voted to strike by 96%.
This is the first walkout at Boeing since 2008. Another setback for the aircraft maker. His reputation and finances have been battered recently. Kamala Harris making a pitch to swing state voters as she heads back out on the campaign trail.
I believe we owe it to the voters to have another debate.
Well, Donald Trump has ruled that out now. The vice president did cook off her post-debate blitz in Charlotte, North Carolina, and Harris is going to be back in Pennsylvania today for 2 more back-to-back rallies. The Justice Department preparing criminal charges in connection with an Iranian hack that targeted Donald Trump's presidential campaign. More from Washington this morning, and Bloomberg's Steve Potisk.
The prospect of criminal charges comes as the Justice Department has raised alarms about aggressive efforts by countries, including Russia and Iran, to meddle in the presidential election. It was not immediately clear when the charges might be announced. Assistant Attorney General Matthew Olson, the Justice Department's top national security official, said in a speech Thursday Iran is making a greater effort to influence this year's election than it has in prior election cycles, and that Iranian activity is growing increasingly aggressive as this election nears. In Washington, Steve Potisk, Bloomberg Radio.
Elon Musk has labeled the Australian government as fascists. This comes over a proposed new law to crack down on digital misinformation, particularly on social media websites. Under the proposed legislation, which has yet to pass Parliament, social media companies could be fined up to 5% of their annual revenue if they fail to take steps to manage the risk that misinformation and disinformation on digital communications platform poses in that country. And the UK's Police and Crime Minister, Dame Diana Johnson, gave a speech to the Police Superintendents Association conference in which she warned of an epidemic of antisocial behavior, theft, and shoplifting that the Labour government had inherited from the Conservatives. At that same police conference, she had her purse stolen. The theft came on the same day the government began releasing some prisoners early to deal with jail overcrowding in England and Wales. Global news, 24 hours a day. Whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm John Tucker. This is Bloomberg. Paul Tom and the award-winning
Lisa Mateo.
Mateo.
Okay, MIT, they're the Beavers. You get the Charles Lieberman was in the other day with a classic MIT ring with a little cute beaver on it. It's a famous ring. Here's the cheer. I'm a beaver, you're a beaver. We are beavers all. And when we get together, we do the beaver call. E to the U du dx, e to the x dx, cosine secant tangent sine 3.14159, integral radical mu div, slipstick slide rule, MIT, go tech.
All right.
Did they get a lot of dates with this?
Yeah, I was saying you get a lot of dates with
They're like magnets. There's a bar. I can't remember the name of the bar right now on Charles Avenue, going north. I can just see it. I mean, and they're not drinking Narragansett lager beer.
No.
They're drinking some craft.
Yes, of course.
Fancy craft.
Well, good for them. The world needs engineers.
E to the U du dx.
Oh,
man, does that bring back memories. Futures up 11. Catherine Kaminski, thank you. Bloomberg Surveillance.
And now look at some of the
Today on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures, well, pretty much treading water. Fresh data from the U.S. kept investors guessing on the size of an expected rate cut from the Federal Reserve. Now, former Fed official Bill Dudley said there's a, quote, strong case for a 50 basis point cut next week. Today, we have more economic data with a read on import prices for August. That's about 15 minutes from now. And also sentiment. That's after the open. So we have NASDAQ futures, little change, up about 15 points. Dow futures up 0.1%, 63 points. S&P futures up 0.2% or 12 points. The 2-year yield at 3.59%. That's down 4 basis points. A yield on the 10-year 3.66%, and that's up 1 basis point. To currencies, the dollar weaker, Japanese yen stronger, up 0.7% at 140.84 against the dollar. The euro stronger, British pound weaker. We have Bitcoin down about 0.5% at around 57,000. To earnings we go. Adobe down 8% after its revenue forecast. Well, it failed to reflect an AI uplift. On the flip side, you have Oracle. They're up 6%. Investors cheer their long-term sales targets. And finally, OpenAI. It's released a new AI model that can perform some human-like reasoning tasks. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg's News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Greatly appreciate it. We've had all sorts of different views, starting with Michael Purvis's lift to 5,800 on SPX this morning. But with the quant, the mathematics, the epsilon, the Greek letters of Katy Kaminski. Let's get real. This weekend, over a beverage of your choice, maybe you're at the beach, maybe you're at a kitchen table trying to figure out what to do about the rent increase. You want to listen to Emily Roland, co-chief investment strategist for a small shop up in Boston. They have old John Hancock and new John Hancock.
I like the old John Hancock Tower.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of memories and all that. Emily joins us this morning. Emily, you have nailed by quality, by America, try to push aside all the noise. We've re-noised after the first week of August. How do you reset for 2025?
We continue, Tom, to have our eye on the ball here. We are continuing to emphasize high quality stocks. We think we're in this late cycle environment where the lagged impact of Fed tightening hasn't tipped us into recession. We continue to spend like crazy in the United States. Not a political statement, by the way, it's just happening. And that's extending the cycle. We want to be careful of reaching too far for risk. We want to start even legging into some more defensive parts of the market. And we continue to want to embrace the income that's available now in high quality bonds.
For you guys at State Street, what is quality, legging into the quality part of the market? What does that mean for you guys?
Yeah, so it's companies with great balance sheets. They have a ton of cash, great return on equity. Think about a company with a limited need to tap the capital markets in order to grow. And with the cost of capital still elevated, companies are now contending with margin pressure. Revenue growth was awesome during the height of the pandemic as companies could pass those higher prices along. Now record revenue growth is slowing, margins are compressing, and the companies that are going to do the best are the ones that can defend those margins. And we're finding a lot of that in the quality factor and most notably in technology.
Emily, it's away from your remit, but let's keep the theme going. I need a hat trick right now. And that is, we had two opinions earlier this week, separate and discrete, reaffirming double-digit earnings growth. I assume you're there, but can you state to us that you see persistency of quality margins that lead to double-digit earning growth?
Yeah, I think it's you can find it, but it's going to be concentrated in those companies. Luckily, the quality factor has concentration in mega cap tech. And of course, those names are dominating the market. If you look at earnings growth just this quarter, half of it was driven by the communication services and technology sector. Revenue growth is coming from those areas of the market. So as long as you can see that holding up, I think you can get there. Now, Tom, the great news is the bar for Q3 is really low. Analysts are penciling in 3.8% year-over-year earnings growth. So I think we should just enjoy it while we can. Like you guys are enjoying the Yankees right now beating the Red Sox. Like, enjoy it while you can.
Emily, you're killing me. Stop it.
We might get better.
I mean, you could see from the new John Hancock, if you go up higher, you can see the lack of offense up at Fenway. It's like a cloud over Fenway Park. Paul, Nvidia. Paul, you were on this.
Yeah. So
from the peak down 21%.
I know, and Tom raised a great question, Emily. If you think about Nvidia, think about AI. That's been such a driver of the stock market performance for the last almost 2 years here. If the AI trade is kind of played out, does that bring some risk into the marketplace that we need to account for?
Yeah, it does because of that concentration. And look, we're bumping up on 30 times forward earnings for the U.S. technology sector. That's about as high as we've gotten over the course of this cycle. Now, of course, it's not the 50 times forward earnings we saw in the late 1990s, but certainly there's been a lot of multiple expansion there. The good news is if you do the math, you guys seem to be doing a lot of math this morning.
Yeah, it's,
so let me just get in on the party.
2 + 2.
If you look at the PE ratio, we would focus on the denominator. Look at the earnings, and you can blame a lot of things for any reset in the technology sector, but it's multiple compression. It is not earnings. The earnings are there. The fundamental case for AI is there. It's just the love affair with it is probably a bit extended.
Paul, Nvidia, 56 times PE, forward PE only to January of next year is a 42.
Yeah, and it gets to a 30 handle on the following year. So this is a company that's earning its way into its multiple. That's what the bulls will tell you here.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. So, I mean, this Federal Reserve, Emily, it seems like it's ready to begin a cutting cycle. How does that kind of impact how you guys are thinking about stocks, bonds, commodities, all that kind of stuff?
Well, Paul, it comes down to what's already priced in to the bond market. The bond market is putting pressure on the Fed right now because we've got 5 rate cuts priced in for this year. So if you start to hear the Fed coming out on next Wednesday as even a little bit more hawkish than what's already priced in the market, I think you might see a repricing there. You'd see bond yields backing up. That would likely cause the dollar to appreciate. It would put some pressure on equity markets very likely here. So we've got to hear a more dovish Fed just to fit in with what the market is already pricing in.
Right. What are you doing with cash? I got 30 seconds. Cash, 5%. It's going to be 4.99%. What happens, Emily Roland?
Yeah, cash is subject to massive reinvestment risk here. We would go out into the belly of the curve, lock in higher rates there. The ag is yielding above 4%. Still get it while you can. Income, get paid to wait.
Emily Roland, thank you for the brief. Really love it. That's what we love to do in surveillance, folks. Have someone like Katy Kaminski and is doing total Greek letter math nerd fest. And they go to Emily Roland, who's talking really basic block and tackle belief with a 3-year holding pattern, 5-year holding pattern. Even better, Paul, we got Chris Morangi coming up.
That's exactly right. Now, so that was just a couple of segments in a row with Boston-based smart folks. And that brings us to, if you want to listen to Bloomberg Radio, 92.9 FM up there. It's a big signal, Tom, for all our friends up there in overall New England.
Okay. Do you realize if the Yankees beat the Red Sox tonight, the dreaded Red Sox are playing 500 ball? And even worse, that's an improvement on last year at this time.
Yeah, I don't know what you guys are doing up there. I don't know what you guys are doing.
We're not spending money. I mean, look at Rich, does Soto, is he with the Yankees next year? Juan Soto?
Yankees or Mets,
is your guess.
That's the smart talk right there.
That was a trade of the year. You talk about the trading deadline. Steve Cohen traded for Scott Havens.
Who?
He traded for Scott Havens.
Okay.
And, it was an amazing trade. Look at the Mets. They're like, I can't even talk about the Mets. I get so upset. I see their uniforms.
Yep.
And it's just painful.
Well, Rich brings up a good point. Juan Soto, I mean, arguably the best hitter in baseball. It was great to watch. Had a big dinger a couple nights ago when I was up there at the stadium. Yankees would love to have him. Oh, my goodness. You think Wright and Judge and him and Stanton for the next few years, how good would that be? But Stevie Cohen's got a big checkbook over with the Mets.
That
so
would
we'll
be
see.
true. We say good morning to the Yankees and the brilliance of Juan Soto more than anyone since Wade Boggs. He's someone who puts it in play. And of course, all of us, our thoughts to Wade Boggs as he fights cancer. He announced that this week. Yep. Wade Boggs, best of fortune
great player
in fighting that illness. Futures up 11, Dow futures up 57 across the nation. In your office, at home, YouTube, subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts. Thank you for that. Number one way to help Lisa Mateo. On your commute, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. And of course, 99.1 FM Washington, Bloomberg 1130, New York. Good morning.
And breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures in the green. This is as investors place their bets on the size of rate cuts from the Fed next week. Now, according to economists surveyed by Bloomberg News, policymakers likely to lower interest rates by 1/4 point next week and at each of the two following meetings. Right now, we have NASDAQ futures little changed, up about 3 points. Dow futures up 0.1%, 74 points at 41,219. S&P futures up 0.1%, 10 points at 5,613. We head over to the 2-year yield at 3.59%. That's down 4 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 3.65%, and that's down 2 basis points. We have spot gold higher, $2,569 an ounce. Brent crude, $72 a barrel. WTI crude, $69 a barrel. Companies making news, Amazon. They plan to spend an additional $2.1 billion on its contract delivery unit. It could include pay raises to almost $22 an hour. And then 4,800 people working at Verizon, they took up the company's offer to basically walk away with an exchange for a severance package that will cost Verizon up to $1.9 billion. And Charter Communications cable TV customers getting a perk as part of a new distribution agreement between Warner Bros. Discovery and Charter. They'll be able to stream HBO for free. Warner Bros. Discovery up 0.2, Charter up about 3%. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Greatly appreciate it. Good morning, everyone across the nation. Economic indicators, Michigan. You do Michigan, 10 a.m.
Yeah.
Michigan, all that inflation expectations.
Yep. Talk about a fight song. Maybe the best fight song of all time.
Yeah, with 111,000 people. They don't have 111,000 people at MIT.
Oh, my gosh. Or Williams College.
Or Williams College as well. We say good morning to all of you. And, of course, our economic indicators, our foundation, brought to you by Commonwealth, supporting more than 2,000 independent financial advisors with a 2-to-1 advisor to staff ratio, small firm attentiveness, big advisor impact. Go to commonwealth.com to learn about their consultative support in technology. Mr. Ross in Miami is talking to PE firms, private equity firms, about some form of interest in the Buffalo Bills winning, Miami Dolphins losing Miami Dolphins.
I'm sure there's going to be huge interest, Tom.
And you said this is a huge deal.
I think it's a huge deal.
They're cashing in.
I think it's a huge deal for a lot of these families to get some liquidity in these amazingly valued assets while still maintaining control. So we'll see how it goes. I think this is going to be a big, big deal for NFL.
We now speak to those that do and do not talk. Mario Gabelli and Chris Morangi have just been out front looking at John Malone and Liberty Media and the small ownership of a baseball team that's always there in October, the Atlanta Braves. Chris, honored to ask you this question. Is PE ownership going to ruin sports and sport investment?
Morning, Tom and Paul. Yeah, I don't think so. These owners obviously have very valuable assets. The average NFL team is worth something like $6 or $7 billion, and they want liquidity. And private equity is a way for them to access that. The NFL has put pretty strict rules in place as to how private equity firms come into the sport. They've approved 4 groups to be able to do this. And I think it'll be manageable. But for now, if you're a public market investor, you've got a limited means of investing in sports. And Liberty Braves, now called Atlanta Braves Holding, is our favorite way of participating.
So, hey, Chris, stepping back a little bit here, I'm just kind of thinking about the earnings season we've just been through, and I know we've got September's a big month for conferences. We just had the big investment banks participating in a conference where they're talking about slowing growth. The economy's slowing, maybe the consumer's tired. I mean, that seems to be a theme here. If that is, in fact, the theme, how do you play that, Chris?
Yeah, sir. We've seen increasing evidence that the consumer is tired. They've spent most of their COVID-era savings. And you're seeing this everywhere from trading down in the grocery store to foregoing trips to the Orlando parks, et cetera. And so, obviously the debate today on Wall Street is, do we enter a recession? How long, how deep, and what's the Fed reaction? And, I think certainly increasing consensus that the Fed is going to be cutting and perhaps cutting aggressively. But the direction of travel is we get back down towards some kind of neutral rate next year, or that's 3% or lower, and but growth slows. Right. And so we are advocating finding companies with defensive businesses that can benefit from rate tailwinds.
One of your top holdings is Berkshire Hathaway. People are trumpeting them with Apple ownership as a Mag 8. Is Berkshire Hathaway a banking franchise unloading Bank of America, or is it a tech play with Apple?
Well, Berkshire Hathaway obviously is largely about the culture that Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger have built at that firm. I think seeing them lighten up, seeing Warren lighten up on the Apple holdings is great. Obviously he's sensitive about valuation. He's sensitive about what his successors will be able to do, and he's freeing up capital, perhaps to do another big deal at some point if we go into recession. but he's just increasing the financial flexibility, which Berkshire certainly has plenty of.
Hey, Chris, one of the best businesses that I've come across in my career is the tower business, the communications tower business. These are the wireless towers that you see all across America along the highways and byways and on the farms, and they hold all the antennas for, your cellular telephone companies and whatnot. American Tower is one of those companies. I know it's a name that you guys have an interest in. Talk to us about your idea behind American Tower, AMT.
Yeah, so Paul, as you laid out, these are fabulous businesses. You've got a tower in the neighborhood. It's very difficult to site them, and you hang an antenna for Verizon, then you hang an antenna for AT&T, and then eventually T-Mobile, and the incremental profits are very high and very long-lasting. And you benefit from each new generation of wireless technology. So going from 3G to 4G and now to 5G gets you more money. But the tower companies were hit pretty hard as rates went up. They have served as bond proxies for a long time. There are also some idiosyncratic elements around AMT, American Tower. They were in the business in India, which is a tough market. They're exiting that by the end of the year, and they are best in class in the U.S. today.
Chris Marenghi, where are you and Mario Gabelli on the disaster known as Hollywood?
Oh, boy.
I mean, it's a question we'd ask Mario from time and again, and I guess even Mr. Malone, but Gordon Crawford at Capital Group and the rest. Chris Marenghi, on Paramount, on Warner Brothers Discovery, I haven't even looked at a chart at Disney. It's so painful. Where are you on that, Chris?
Well, we're sharing the pain, obviously, but obviously an interesting development yesterday. I mentioned a bit earlier in the program. Charter and Warner Brothers are doing a very forward-looking deal. David Zaslav, who runs Warner Brothers Discovery, is being out ahead of this. What I call the great reaggregation. That is, you're going to rebundle. There are going to be fewer streaming services, whether that's because some of them go out of business, or more likely we see consolidation in the space. But you're going to probably be receiving those streaming services from the old cable companies who are selling you broadband, and they're going to be priced more attractively. They're going to be easier to access with the technology that they provide, it's a great time to be a consumer in this business because there's so much content out there. It's not as great a time to be an investor, but that's changing. We are seeing some rationalization.
So, Chris, you've known, and Mario's known John Malone for such a long time, and he's got still a lot of exposure to what I would call traditional or legacy media. At this stage of his life, what do you think he does, generally speaking, with those types of holdings?
Well, in general, we've seen a simplification of his holdings. I should mention that John, of course, is on both sides of that Warner Brothers and Discovery transaction. Liberty Broadband, which is one of his companies, owns 26% of Charter. And then, of course, John has his personal holdings in Discovery, which go back to, the beginnings of Liberty Media when it was spun off in 2004. We're seeing rationalization. We just saw also this week Liberty Sirius, which was a Liberty entity that owned 82% of Sirius XM Radio. That was split off and merged into Sirius, so now we have one entity there. Obviously, the Braves, which we talked about earlier, that was split off last year. I think that gets sold. Liberty Global, which is his holding in Europe, is going to spin off their Swiss business by the end of this year. So I think we're going to see a reshuffling of the debt, a great simplification of what ultimately will be his estate.
Chris, thank you so much. Chris Marenghi with us with the Gabelli.
Yes,
wide-ranging conversation there, including, of course, where we see in the monetization of these billions. An average NFL team is $6 billion.
Yeah,
right now, a team I would never
blink
watch.
Your eye, and it's going to be higher tomorrow.
So if they're $6 billion, what does that make? Like the Dallas Cowboys.
Exactly. I don't. Our good friends at Sportico, they do some great work on that.
Yeah.
Some ex-Bloomberg guys.
Yeah, we'll have to see. Of course, we'll continue to follow the Miami Dolphins story this morning. Bloomberg Surveillance. We're brought to you by Interactive Brokers, their bond marketplace. Access Interactive Brokers' vast selection of over 1 million global fixed income securities, no markups, no built-in spreads, low transparent commissions. Learn more at ibkr.com/bonds. Red and green on the screen, futures up 6. With our news in New York City, John Tucker.
All right, Tom, Paul, and Lisa, after back-to-back rallies in North Carolina, Kamala Harris is holding 2 more rallies today in another key swing state, Pennsylvania. Let's get more from Bloomberg's Josh Wingrove.
Pennsylvania looks like it's increasingly the ball game. The polls look really good for them in Wisconsin and Michigan. And the question is, how do you get those other 19 electoral college votes? Well, magic number, Pennsylvania has 19. So to win, she either needs Pennsylvania or she needs some combination of other states. Nevada plus either North Carolina or Georgia would get her there. Those are, of course, traditionally less blue states, although some polling has her competitive or even leading recently in North Carolina, for instance. You're going to see both of them in Pennsylvania all the time.
Bloomberg's Josh Wingrove reports Donald Trump is on a West Coast swing right now, enter a rally in Arizona. He's going to be holding a news conference in a state that's not expected to be a battleground for Republicans, California. Meantime, Donald Trump making a new pledge if he's elected, no taxes on overtime pay. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has more.
Seeking to gain footing after the shaky debate, this is an effort by him and his strategist to change the focus from debates and hit the road to rallies and promises. This one in Arizona aimed at blue-collar workers that he needs to win. He says the people who work overtime are among the hardest working citizens in our country. Now, over the last 3 months, Trump has rolled out a steady drumbeat of tax cut plans. He has not explained yet how to pay for them, and a Bloomberg review says they would add more than $10.5 trillion to the national debt over the next 10 years. Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Radio.
And the world's most desperately needed airplane is back in production. No, it's not from Boeing or Airbus. It's made by de Havilland Aircraft of Canada. It's a specialized amphibious firefighting plane that can hold as much as 1,600 gallons of water. As climate change makes wildfires more frequent, it's needed more than ever. They were out of production for almost 10 years. De Havilland also used to make the iconic Beaver, which, the seaplane. Harrison Ford, the actor, has one. Swears by it.
It's
Gorgeous
serious
plane.
stuff up there. I mean, that's how you get from point A to point B.
Up in the Great White North.
All right, John Tucker, thank you so much. Robin Wigglesworth writing it up at the FT. I think Lisa's going to feature this Monday. We're going to get out front on it right now. A paper out of the St. Louis Fed, 3 PhD economists, and they write up how modern dating exacerbates inequality. We go to surveillance dating expert John Tucker on this. Our findings of minimal changes in preferences selectivity in aggregate sorting of couple.
Well, this sounds really romantic.
Yeah. The unexpected finding is that the proliferation of dating apps seems to have had a minimal impact on who John Tucker ends up marrying. John, I mean, we're talking here Tinder. I mean, when you were on Tinder, what was it like?
Johnny never been on Tinder. Did you know Lisa, like a teenager, tried to pick her up a couple of months ago? What was that story in the Walmart?
At Walgreens. That's okay.
She still got it going on.
There you go.
Don't need an app for that.
Bloomberg surveillance.
John, you have news.
And now look at some of the local headlines making news in the tri-state. New York City Police Commissioner Edward Caban has resigned.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Little movement in futures. This is after wins across the averages of more than 0.5 to 1%. So right now we'll start with NASDAQ futures. Little change, down about 10 points. Dow futures up 0.1%, 46 points. And we have S&P futures up 0.1% or 8 points. We have the 2-year yield 3.60%, up 3 basis points. A yield on the 10-year 3.67%, and that is little change. To commodity, spot gold higher, $2,571 an ounce. Brent crude $72 a barrel. WTI crude $69 a barrel. Moving the markets, that's furniture retailer Restoration Hardware. They're up 19%. It said demand really picked up last quarter, lifting revenues, adjusted earnings above estimates. And then you have shares of Moderna down 4%. That was following yesterday's sell-off. It unveiled a cost-cutting plan, really failed to reassure investors. And finally, Redfin reporting the U.S. housing market just had its worst spring selling season in a dozen years. Some of the biggest drop-offs in cities like Florida and Texas. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
I have a Redfin feed for different cities. I'm just curious about it, and everything's a price decline. I mean, every just email after email is down.
You got to live there.
This is not only timely, but it's also a great honor. There's a guy named Marty at Bloomberg, and he thinks I'm a journalist. He's the only one. Everybody else is like, you're kidding me. This guy from Wall Street, and you know what LIBOR is, and you know the MIT fight song with all the mathematics. We have a few real journalists, and one of them is one S. Baker. Stephanie Baker it's authoritative, deep, penetrating, and you end up in her new book with 340 pages of punishing Putin inside the global economic war to bring down Russia. And I'm not going to mince words. This is a book that alludes to the TV show Slow Horses. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And she's nasty. I mean, she does amazing work on Evgeny Kokman, Graham Bonham Carter, Olga Shrieky, Vladimir Voronenko, Ekterina Voronina, and Jack Hannock. Forget about Putin. Who are these people that are enablers, friends, and fixers?
You did a good job on the pronunciation there.
Did you okay?
Yeah, you did okay.
That's because I'm watching Slow Horses.
Yeah. Those are in the category of fixers and enablers, and they have been targeted by the Justice Department as part of a push by something called the Klepto Capture Task Force to go after sanctions evasion. And what they've done is, and particularly in the United States, they've gone after these big oligarchs who, many of whom were sanctioned going back to 2018, so they had a track record to look at for sanctions evasion. They've frozen their assets, and they're now trying to forfeit those assets, sell them for Ukraine. It's slow, it's difficult. It's going through the court process, as it should, but it's been a sea change in the approach to Russian money and sanctions evasion.
But the bottom line is you got 4,000 square feet in Mayfair. You're mostly in London, Stephanie. What everybody in America wants to know is why can't the United Kingdom catch up with our seriousness? Is the United Kingdom, continental Europe, are they punishing Putin?
They are, but you're right in saying that they have been slow. They really only got their act together to sanction Russia and these Russian billionaires in 2022 after Putin's full-scale invasion. The UK has frozen something like 22 billion pounds worth of Russian assets, but unlike the U.S., they don't have that track record going back, when sanctions enforcement was weak. They hadn't sanctioned these guys back in 2018, so they don't really have a period of time to look at to be like, gotcha, you were evading these sanctions, we're going to go after you. So it's been much harder. They don't have an FBI. They have a weak law enforcement that's not quite as up to the task going after white-collar criminals.
Stephanie, your book is Punishing Putin Inside the Global Economic War to Bring Down Russia. Is it effective? Is it working?
It's a really good question, and you're right. They haven't been as effective as many hoped early on in the war. I think because some of the sanctions that they undertook were so unprecedented, there was frothy optimism that this would really bring Russia to its knees. But what happened is Russia rebounded, in particular off of global oil revenues. And that's what I detail in the book, Punishing Putin, that the main challenge facing the West is Russia's oil revenues. Russia's oil has been the mainstay of their economy for decades, and until they can figure out how to undercut Russian oil revenues, it's going to be impossible to kind of attack Putin's ability to wage war.
A journalism of Stephanie Baker, line by line in this book, 300 plus pages, Punishing Putin. A guy named Taleb of the Black Swan, an authoritative, gripping investigation. Page 97, I was there. The difference is I was in Helsinki in a cigar bar. John Bolton, controversial, good friend of the show, thank you, Ambassador Bolton, he's there with Trump. What did Trump do in Helsinki? Did he punish Putin?
Well, we don't know because there were no notes taken and there was only his translator present. So I do go into that to some degree in the book, but one of the crucial points is, as we know what happened in Helsinki, he basically fawned praise on Putin, said he believed him when it came to...
Would we see that in a second term?
That's the big concern, in particular with Ukrainians. He was very skeptical, Trump was very skeptical of sanctions in his first administration, rolled out the sanctions that he did under pressure from Congress and his national security advisors. Trump has said he will solve the war in a day, and I think a lot of Ukrainians are worried that that's going to mean he's going to force them to cede territory, and in order to get Putin to agree, he's going to agree to lift sanctions, or at least give Russia some sanctions relief, which is exactly what Putin wants, because even if the sanctions aren't working as well, they're still costing Russia hundreds of billions of dollars. Putin wants some sanctions relief to regroup and rearm.
Yeah.
So are these sanctions, are they impacting everyday Russians to the point where they may, I guess, reduce their support of Putin? Do we have any evidence that that's happening?
Well, what they've done so far, what Russia is facing is very high inflation. So inflation is like 9%. They just hiked interest rates today to 19%.
Wow.
And that's partly because of the war economy. Putin has been showering the defense industry with money. He's been paying these soldiers huge bonuses to go fight on the front line.
I just heard that from a friend of mine who has a brother who's fighting, and he's so wealthy now.
Yeah, I mean,
upgraded his apartment, and now he's driving a nice car, and
that's kind of unsustainable at this
Yes.
point because they're facing labor shortages, both in terms of staffing defense factories as well as getting people to sign up to fight, and they've had to increase those bonuses even more to persuade people to join the front line.
I want you to talk now about the world-class intensity of your journalism. You came out of Oberlin.
Yeah.
Darken the door and Aldwych at LSE. Fine. When did you become intense about journalism versus the criticism today that journalists are just going through the motion? What's the pixie dust that got you to the intensity of writing something like Punishing Putin?
Well, I lived in Eastern Europe and started freelancing. I was really interested in doing that, from the get-go as soon as I got out of college. I went to Russia in the 90s, and that's when I kind of pivoted to business and finance, because the story then was all about the economy. It was all about the transition, Russia privatizing, a lot of the corruption that went around that. And that was the big story, and it was a really great training ground. It was really hard to be a reporter in Russia in the 1990s.
I've got like 30 seconds. What am I going to do with Stephanie Baker in 30 seconds? We're not talking football at Oberlin. No, we're not. What we'll do, Punishing Putin. I can't say enough about it. Rave reviews inside the global economic war to bring down Russia. Bill Browder, he has attended the show, calls this a riveting inside story of the unprecedented economic war to take down Mr. Putin. It is, to be polite, a work in progress. Stephanie Baker, thank you so much.
Thanks for having
joining
me.
us out of Queen Victoria Street in London, each and every day in London for Bloomberg News and Bloomberg Opinion. Futures up 12. It is a perfect Friday. Stephanie Baker's not leaving until there's a cloud in the sky here in New York. It'll be there. The Cure. We have to play British music for Stephanie Baker. Good morning.
Tuesday's grey and Wednesday too. Thursday
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Are these stocks under-owned by institutional Wall Street?
A lot of these companies talking about generative AI.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Investors just worried about the ongoing sales slump in China.
And Michael Barr with news.
A ship traveling through the southern Red Sea has been attacked.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning across the nation on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. That's a new digital way to get everything that Lisa Mateo does. The award-winning Lisa Mateo.
Of course.
Taking in trophies last night.
She can earn the trophies. She's not very good at keeping them.
Left him at a bar in Penn Station. They're out there somewhere,
hey,
Lisa,
she's not the
this
first
morning.
person to do that.
Okay, I feel better.
You feel better right now?
Yeah.
Did you leave 1, 2, or 5 trophies?
I left one. My coworker Sebastian, he took the other 2. And
Thank
I said,
God
I
for
will
that.
take care of this one, and I lost
Okay.
it.
Well, we say good morning to Lisa Mateo, who's the achievement here of what we see at Bloomberg Radio awarded last night in New York City. The achievement of this market is critical. I really want to emphasize, folks, this was a boring Friday about Wednesday.
Right.
And something started changing Paul Thursday. And Anna Wong and Estelle wrote a blistering Bloomberg Economics note at 6 a.m. this morning, and they said all of a sudden the Fed meeting's in play 50 or 25 basis points.
September 18th, Tom, next week, we'll see here. We were going to have some University of Michigan data coming out at 10 a.m. Wall Street time, which Alex Steele and I will be reporting. And that's probably one of the last data points that'll really be, I guess, informative to this Federal Reserve as they think about rates going forward.
From the Interactive Broker Studios, our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
We got it in futures, trying to keep those gains rolling along from yesterday. Right now we have S&P futures up about 0.1%, 10 points at 5,612. Dow futures up 0.2%, 87 points at 41,232. And NASDAQ futures, well, down about a fraction, down about 4 points at 19,445. We have the 2-year yield at 3.58%, down 5 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 3.66%, and that's down 1 basis point. To commodities, we have spot gold higher, $2,573 an ounce. Brent crude, $72 a barrel. WTI crude, $69 a barrel. Shares of Boeing down 3%. Its factory workers started their first walkout 16 years. TD Cowen estimates that this strike could last 50 days, cut up to $3.5 billion from Boeing's cash flow. We shall see. Meanwhile, American Airlines flight attendants, they approved a contract that will raise wages as much as 20%, increase pay benefits by $4.2 billion over 5 years. American Airlines up about 0.5%. And then sticking with airlines, some news from United. It selected Elon Musk's Starlink service for in-flight internet. United will begin testing it early next year. They're up about 0.3%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Greatly appreciate it. Red and green on the screen. On Wall Street, it is 9:03. At the studios of CBS, it is 9:03 on a Friday, which means Margaret Brennan and Face the Nation have absolutely no clue where they're going to be Sunday morning for Face the Nation across the CBS television network. That's the turmoil, the tumult of our British short election cycle. Joining us now, Margaret Brennan of Face the Nation. Of course, hear this effort Sunday afternoons at 2 on Bloomberg Radio. Margaret, good luck with this Sunday. How do you deem to approach our political maelstrom?
Wow. Well, we have J.D. Vance, the junior Republican senator from Ohio, on to, I guess, explain some of the new tax policies and policies that Donald Trump wants to deliver on. I was just reading through what he announced yesterday with this new no tax on overtime for workers once they hit 40 hours a week. And I've got so many questions on how this is going to work. I'm really hoping he can explain that. And I want to talk to him, of course, about so many other things that are circulating on the campaign trail.
What are conventional Republicans doing? I mean, I guess the focus is on Haley of the Carolinas, but as a general statement within CBS reporting, what are conventional Republicans doing after the debate and the short step forward to November 5th?
Great question, because neither J.D. Vance nor Donald Trump are conventional Republicans. And I think we are seeing that in these policies like the one I just mentioned, where it's very populist. It's not fiscal conservative, your dad's Republican Party, your grandfather's Republican Party. And that question of what crosses a line. You heard Vice President Harris make a play for some of those voters on that stage on debate night, where she said explicitly in relation to January 6th, if that was a bridge too far for you, there's a place here in our campaign. They are trying to target and make a play for persuadable voters who don't identify as Democrats but aren't comfortable with the remaking of the Republican Party in the J.D. Vance, Donald Trump form. So that's part of the game of inches here, Tom, that's being played.
Yeah.
Margaret, former President Trump says he's not inclined to do another debate. I don't think there's going to be another debate based upon some of his statements here. If you're Kamala Harris, how does that change maybe your media strategy? Do you sit down with the Margaret Brennans of the world? Do you sit down to maybe do town halls or even a press conference, God forbid? What do you think the press, the media strategy of Kamala Harris should be?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to give advice. Obviously, I'm biased on this. I'll talk my own book and say, come on, face the nation anytime. But in terms of the question about the debate, I know the next date on the calendar for the two campaigns is October 1st on the CBS debate. That's the vice presidential Waltz-Vance matchup. And that may take on new resonance given the 78-year-old challenger and the question of J.D. Vance, what he would do if he were to step into those shoes. And we'll watch for that. I'm cynical here. I don't believe that a no today means a no tomorrow. There are offers that I know of on the table from multiple networks who are, including CBS. The CBS disclosed that yesterday, making offers for another debate. Does this change? Possibly. Could there be town halls? Possibly.
Are we advantaged, Margaret? Paul brought this up earlier. Suddenly, it's almost a British election. It's shocking how constrained it is. Do you suggest, with all the reporting at CBS, that we're advantaged by this compressed campaign?
Is there an advantage to it?
Yeah, it's shorter. We're not, we're not running it in February of 2024. It was, Harris, Trump, it's new, it's short, let's go.
Sure. I mean, I suppose in terms of the shiny new factor, or not so new since she is the incumbent, but new to the top of the ticket, and there is a new energy that came from that. The question is does that take the vice president over the line in those 7 states that are neck and neck, and our CBS polling has shown they remain neck and neck. In terms of Donald Trump, he is that known entity. It's hard to believe there's someone in America that doesn't have an opinion about him at this point. Is that a disadvantage to him? I don't know. His followers are pretty passionate.
Margaret Brennan, thank you so much. Look forward to Face the Nation. See it on the CBS television network Sunday morning. You can hear Margaret Brennan and Face the Nation 2 p.m. Sunday in New York and Washington, D.C. and Bloomberg 92.9 FM in Boston. Face the Nation this Sunday at 2 on Bloomberg Radio. I have no idea in this election. This is why it's great to have Margaret on.
Yeah.
I guess I knew there was a vice presidential debate. Is it going to be the same, like no audience?
I think people might tune in here because, I don't know, there's so much you don't know about Kamala Harris. There's so much you don't know about this guy, Mr. Vance. And again, former President Trump is 78 years old, so it's maybe something you got to pay attention to.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see. There. Red and green on the screen, 20 minutes to the market, opening Michigan data at 10 o'clock as well. With our news in New York City, John Tucker.
All right, Tom, Paul, and Lisa, for the first time in 16 years, factory workers have walked off the job at Boeing. Members of the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, representing 33,000 Boeing employees across the West Coast, voted overwhelmingly to strike. Will there be another debate? Before President Donald Trump and Vice President Harris, Bloomberg's Amy Morris tells us we have kind of a pretty good indication right now. It probably won't happen.
Donald Trump ruled out another debate with an all-caps declaration on Truth Social. Quote, "There will be no third debate." He insists he won their first debate, so he doesn't need to participate in another one. Vice President Kamala Harris spoke at a campaign event in Charlotte, North Carolina, shortly after Trump's statement.
I believe we owe it to the voters to have another debate.
It is not clear if the vice president was directly responding to Trump's post. Trump and Harris's running mates, Republican Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio and Democratic Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, are slated to hold their own debate on October 1st with CBS News. In Washington, Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has arrived in Washington ahead of a meeting with President Biden. Sources telling Bloomberg the U.S. and UK are discussing allowing Kyiv to conduct strikes inside Russia using British cruise missiles backed by U.S. navigational data. Speaking yesterday, Russian President Putin warned against that move.
This will be their direct participation, and this, of course, will significantly change the very essence, the very nature of the conflict. This will mean that NATO countries, the US, and European countries are at war with Russia.
Putin there through an interpreter. The discussion comes after the U.S. confirmed that Moscow has received shipments of ballistic missiles from Iran. And crews continue battling 3 wildfires east of Los Angeles. In San Bernardino County, there's a red glow in the sky and a strong haze in the air as the flames continue to consume the area. 3 fires have scorched more than 100,000 acres across Southern California. Elon Musk labels the Australian government fascist over proposed new laws to crack down on digital misinformation, in particular on social media websites. Under the proposed legislation, which has yet to pass Parliament, social media companies could be fined up to 5% of their annual revenue. And an update to a story that we told you about earlier. I took the liberty of calling NJ Transit at Penn Station. They're lost and found. They tell me they have not found Lisa's award, her major radio award. Instead, I was told you have to fill out a form.
I did that.
You did?
Yes, I put in a claim.
You put in a claim. I'm told it was a blue box.
But it's 9:12. The package store doesn't open up till 11 a.m.
Yeah, I know.
You know, that's where she left it at the counter.
There is the distinct possibility it could be found and labeled as a suspicious package, then taken up to Rodman's neck and exploded as a precaution.
Precaution. City safety as well.
Yep.
Did you take? Is there any evidence of this award, or did this get Instagrammed by?
Oh, it's on Twitter.
It's on social.
Then it must be true.
Yes, it's on the internet.
We will have to see.
I'll never live it down.
Futures up 10, Dow futures up 109. The salient point this week has been a reaffirmation of double-digit earnings growth, which a lot of people disagree with. And then all of a sudden, folks, we're back to a 25 or 50 beep cut. And Paul, that's really been the fuel on the fire here the last day and a half.
Yeah, I think
Could we get 50 beep? We don't make our opinion on this, but I got to be sold on 50.
Right, exactly, and so that's why we bring in the great guests here. We have here, Tom, rate strategists, fund managers, give us their thoughts on what they think is happening in these markets, including our next guest, Steve England.
I mean, Cy sends the headline in right away. Cy Benson's driving all of our intellect here. Traders pricing 40% chance of half-point Fed cut next week. That's a big number. 40%, 40.
Yeah, okay.
I don't.
We'll be here. We'll be reporting.
We'll be reporting at a 2-year yield. Let's report that right now in 7 basis points.
Can't wait to see the
Huge
next
moves.
mortgage rating.
3.57, 10-year yield 3.65, 30-year bond well under 4% as well. I look at the real yield down to new lows, 1.56% on the 10-year inflation-adjusted yield. On YouTube, Bloomberg Surveillance.
headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got a mix of red and green on the screen, and this is after fresh U.S. data kept investors guessing on the size of an expected rate cut from the Federal Reserve. You had former Fed official Bill Dudley said there's, quote, a strong case for a 50 basis point cut next week. Today, after the markets open, we'll see a read on sentiment. Let's get over to futures now. Right now, NASDAQ futures down about 0.1%, 18 points. Dow futures up 0.2%, 111 points. S&P futures up 0.1% or 10 points. The two-year yield at 3.57%, down 6 basis points. A yield on the 10-year of 3.65%, and that's down 2 basis points. To currencies, the dollar weaker. We have the Japanese yen up 0.8% at 140.62 against the dollar. The euro, British pound stronger. We have Bitcoin down about 0.5% at around 57,000. To earnings we go. Adobe down 8%. Its revenue forecast failed to reflect that AI uplift. And then you have Oracle. They're up 6%. Investors cheered their long-term sales targets. And finally, a boost to Uber's efforts to get more involved in the driverless vehicle area. We have the company. It's going to be the sole supplier of rides on Alphabet's Waymo cars in Austin and in Atlanta. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Greatly appreciate it. Right now, on short notice, I thought he would be not in today after what the Red Sox did last night, 4 hits. And,
I thought about not coming in.
I mean, come on. If they lose today, it's 500 ball. It's like when they're in 6th place in the old American League in my ute.
Well,
it's like painful.
We're like Brooklyn, wait till next year.
What happened, seriously, what happened in the last 2 days? Anna Wong and Estella published this morning that 50 beeps is actually in play. Why?
Well, we went into the blackout period with the Fed not saying one way or another.
Fair.
Markets convinced themselves based on data and just the historical background of the Fed that 25 basis points was going to be it, and it still could be. Yesterday we had 2 stories out, one from Colby Smith in the Financial Times and one from Nick Timraos in the
She quoted
Wall Street
everybody
Journal.
on surveillance. You see how she does that, Paul? Colby just listens to surveillance. Clarida, quote.
That's
quote.
That's the way everybody gets their information. But those 2 suggested that 50 basis points could be in play, that it was a close call. Now, we all remember how the Fed has used the Wall Street Journal as a pipeline to send messages to the markets. They haven't done it in a long time, but they did do it in June of 2022 with Nick Timraos when they wanted to go to 75, when they got very bad economic data, inflation data the week before when they were in the blackout and couldn't tell. So I don't think this was a message that they're going to do 50, but it is possible that somebody sent a message through them that it's on the table so that the markets are prepared.
I mean, I have sat with McKee folks at Ben's Chili Bowl up on U Street in Washington, and he's pointed to me the smoke signals coming up above the Eccles building. Has this story moved so fast in 2 days that now adults at the Fed have to say, stop it, put them in their place, Wednesday, September 18th at 2 p.m., 25 beeps?
No, I think it works the other way. I think they either are just writing the obvious that it is a possibility, or somebody called them up and said, well, we haven't ruled out without going any further, so that if they want to, remember they got retail sales next week too. If that were to come in badly, then they maybe want to be more dovish. But if they haven't completely decided yet, then they go into it with the markets at least not going to be shocked one way or another.
2 adult questions, and you're the expert. Do they know where retail sales are right now? That's the big event next week. Yeah. And can they do the math on September 27, core PCE, and that's what the 50 basis point chat's about? They're getting out front of those 2 reports.
No and yes. Yes, they can do the math on PCE, and core PCE is, according to just about everybody who's now plugged in the data, going to come in at about 0.1%. So it's going to be very low, and that's what they want to see, which enables them to be more dovish if they want to be, because it counteracts the CPI, PPI data we got a little
Yeah.
bit. Retail sales, they do not know, but there are many alternative measures, including, and this is a shameless plug, but on the Bloomberg, the ECAN function has a second measure, which is our collection of retail sales data, and it's showing that retail sales would be relatively
What
strong.
is Michael McDonough doing? Where are they? Are they in a bunker
This
below
is-
Home Depot?
Yeah. And
They're doing incredible
with all
work.
kinds of beakers of, scientific
Paul,
stuff
everybody's
there.
stealing it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like industry-wide. Everybody's
love this
using
World Macroeconomic.
ECAN Go.
Yeah.
Well,
World
and the Chicago Fed has their CART survey, which is also a retail sales survey. We haven't gotten this month's yet. We'll probably get it today or Monday, and it's in part based on the second measure data that we have. But so there are alternative measures of retail sales that you can look at, and then it depends on how you weight them and what you think is most important. And remember, with retail sales, it's always gasoline prices.
Yeah, well, gasoline prices coming down big time. Thank you very much. And John Tucker keeps us up to date on that. Michael, the sources you talk to, the economists you talk to, are they comfortably in a soft landing camp, or are they concerned that this may be bumpier going forward?
Well, I think they fastened their seatbelts, because turbulence might be ahead. But in general, they're confident about or feel at least sanguine about the idea of a soft landing. By all appearances, at the moment, that's where we are. The question is, do you go from there into trouble? Which is why I've urged Jay Powell to just come out and say, yeah, we had a soft landing, because, from here, anything can happen. It could be worse. The economy never really lands. It keeps going.
Right. And how about on the labor market? I mean, 4.2, 4.3, is there... That still feels foolish employment to a lot of folks, I think.
Foolish?
Yeah, foolish.
I like
Is
it's a
that
Duke.
good? Is
When
that
you're a
good?
Duke, they use that.
That's foolish.
It's very foolish.
Are we okay right here? And can it even drift higher?
We're okay. It could drift a little higher before the Fed gets overly concerned. They had at one point thought that we would get to 4.5, and a lot of people on Wall Street thought so too. We plumbed the depths of how far you can go down with full employment without causing problems, and nobody really knows for sure.
Are you going to be in Empower Stadium this weekend? Denver Broncos, Pittsburgh Steelers. You going out to Denver?
I am not. I am going to Yankee Stadium tomorrow.
Oh, now we're talking.
For Red Sox. Yankees.
This is a wake, right?
We hope not. We're hoping it's one last chance for that great chant that Boston and New York Mets fans have.
Oh, would you like to say that now?
No,
so
I'm
we
not
can
going to say it.
use our license? Michael McKee, thank you so much. Magical always in September when Yankees Red Sox play. For those of you worldwide, it's actually really still special, even though the teams seem to be on.
It doesn't matter who's up or who's
diversion
down.
pass.
They just kind of split them. And if you overlook any period of time.
Well, there's parity this year.
Well, I think it's just the competitive juices come out of both teams, both fan bases. And I don't care who's good, who's bad. They play each other tough every single
But
time.
to this season, it used to be, right now you're going, who's going to win 100 games?
Yeah.
We're trying to get to 90 games. I mean, it's going to be a lot more like football. Anurag Rana is coming up. I actually did this morning. I went to look at the new iPhones.
Did you?
Which, when I was in the Bentley, weren't up yet on the different phone apps.
No.
But they are like late today or something.
I think so, yeah. And I was into the Verizon store on Lexington Avenue a couple days ago, and the gentleman there says, you can start pre-order today, Tom. So make sure all the
I don't know what time
all the
it is,
minions
but
on your plan, make sure they're aware
Lisa's
of
been
this.
distracted today.
Yes.
I mean,
I think
did your daughter?
I've got 3 of them to order. No, I'm kidding.
It's I talked to one of the phone vendors. I'm not going to say which one. We're not in the business of selling. They were incredibly polite, incredibly organized.
Yep.
I mean, it's a racket. They know exactly what they're doing.
Sure.
It's no money down. Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Add it up. And that's the way.
Buy now, pay later. Is that what the kids do these days?
Yeah, that's what it's very much.
We knew that as the layaway plan.
Pay later.
Yep.
And often. And so we need to get the markets open. We do this on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. On your commute, 99.1 FM Washington, Bloomberg 1130 New York, 92.9 FM in Boston. We say good morning on radio. When home at the office, YouTube, subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo alongside Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney with your opening bell report. Now, we've had a pretty mixed bag of U.S. data this week. It's really been keeping investors guessing on the size of an expected rate cut from the Fed next week. This morning, we learned import prices fell in August as oil prices declined. Imported airfare saw seasonal declines. Traders pressing in a 40% chance of a half-point cut. So let's see how we start things off on a Friday the 13th. None of that. S&P right now up about 0.1%, 6 points, 5,602. We have the Dow up about 0.1%, 41 points, 41,143. The Nasdaq little change, up about 6 points at 17,575. The 2-year yield 3.57%, down 6 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 3.65%, and that's down 2 basis points. We have spot gold higher, $2,577 an ounce. Brent crude $72 a barrel. WTI crude $69 a barrel. At the open, I want to check in with shares of Boeing right now. They are down about 1%. That is your opening bell report. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Okay, the way it works at Bloomberg, folks, is Mandeep Singh and Anurag Rana can't be in the same building at the same time. So Mandeep Singh's working from home.
Yep.
Legit. Because Anurag Rana darkened the door of our world headquarters here in New York, usually based out of Chicago. To say senior tech analyst barely describes it. Anurag, I don't care about Adobe or Oracle. I'm looking at the phone service now. Good things come to those who wait. Demand is high right now. Please hang tight in this waiting room. When it's your turn to shop, we'll redirect you automatically. Does everybody need a new iPhone this morning?
It happens a lot the first day when it goes to up sale. I've been waiting for the last few hours for them to open orders, which started at 8 a.m. Eastern time. And I honestly, in the 15 minutes I was able to get through, I'll pick it up next Friday. Right. I'm very happy about it.
How much memory should we get in our phone? I mean, you're a pro. You're downloading secret files and all that. Yeah. How much in our iPhone 16?
I go with the basic because I have the premium iCloud plan, so it doesn't matter to me.
So what am I getting again?
The 16 Pro.
Okay, thank you. So Anurag, he's got a day job being like tech guru for Bloomberg Intelligence, but his side job is my personal iPhone shopper. I just give my credit card and he goes and
so
gets
you have the iCloud, so you don't have to spend up for all that RAM.
Yeah.
Like if I want to get the complete season of Slow Horses on there, all 4 seasons, I'm not going to use up all the RAM on the phone?
No, I have never, in the last 15 years, I've never seen any storage issues. You go with the basic model, it's not a problem, but you want to get the iCloud premium plan so that you're not looking at things.
Lisa, do you have the iCloud
Would you like to weigh in?
No, but here's the thing. I'm paying these extra $1.99 a month, $2.99 a month for all this extra storage. Yeah. Did I do it the wrong way? Was I supposed to go your way? Am I wrong?
See? No, he's my personal iPhone shopper.
So when you really buy a Rolls Royce, you don't worry about the price of oil and these things. So I really don't you need to get the premium plans for these things to just work seamlessly. You don't want any headache. You don't want anything not syncing properly.
So sum up this intelligent conversation. This is the most important conversation we've had today.
Yeah.
With the phrase AI. Where does this madness fit in to your day job, the future of this AI world?
So one of the things that we have said that when you look at Apple, it has probably the most valuable distribution arm of any kind of device at this point, because it's usually very rich people who would own this particular product. Over the next 2 years, we will see a lot of AI applications come in, and you would need a phone like an iPhone 16 for those to run. You may not want to upgrade this year, maybe you will upgrade it next year, but within the next 2 years, we will see a lot of phones being refreshed. We think it's a little more biased towards next year because the phone model is going to be a lot different than this one, which is very much like the last year's model. But the next 2 years are really good for this entire iPhone family.
So talk to us about what's going on. If I want to get exposure to AI, I mean, Tom's owned Nvidia since day one, so he's fine. But for the rest of us, we want to get exposure to AI in the software space. Because I like the software space. I like the recurring revenue that you've always taught us about. Where do I go in software for AI exposure?
We think it is still the biggest cloud players because you are not going to see companies do a lot of this in-house. They will be using either Microsoft OpenAI relationship, Amazon-Anthropic relationship. Oracle's also benefiting because it's getting the bypass of all of these companies. Google has Google and Gemini. So there is all of these big companies. And I mean, as much as you dislike, but these big companies are only going to get bigger over the next 5 years, much bigger.
How about this? I guess one of the issues with AI just come into the marketplace maybe over the last 3 to 6 months is, okay, we've got through the euphoria of people spending money on AI and getting exposure to AI, and that drove Nvidia and drove a lot of other companies. Now the discussion has become, wait, what's my return on this investment again? What's that discussion go like?
So when you look at somebody like an Nvidia, they are all these cloud players are buying chips from them. Something over like 40% of the chips are bought by the cloud providers. The cloud providers are then going to companies, they're going to healthcare companies, banks, and saying, we'll help you develop an AI chatbot, an AI application that would help you drive productivity.
Barclays, with a brilliant report, just like the serious work you're doing at Bloomberg Intelligence, on the electrical usage, the electricity utility build out. To make a long story short, folks, in 3 cups of coffee, it's going to be at least 9% of the nation's electricity. A sentence from Barclays. Northern Virginia, good morning, 99.1 FM, which currently accounts for over 20% of U.S. data center capacity. Can we build out the electrical need responsibly and appropriately without Lisa Mateo's utility bill going to the moon?
I think that is going to be the single most important thing, the capacity to run a lot of these AI applications. My colleague Omid just did a very brilliant podcast on tech disruptors for Schneider Electric CEO. Highly recommend people listening to it. It was phenomenal in the way the world's energy needs or electric needs, electrification is improving, and how much they are doing to solve a lot of this problem.
But we're getting brownouts in Texas. Well, Texas has got their wacko utility structure. I mean, when John Tucker logs on in the Lincoln Tunnel, Staten Island dims. Are we ready for this, Anurag?
I think money will need to be spent at a federal level to help this cause, because transmission lines are not there. The electricity generation needs to be there. Nobody wants to build nuclear plants.
Senator Warren of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and a few other Republicans are going to say, you guys are making all the money, you build the capacity. Why shouldn't Microsoft and their brethren build out the electrical capacity?
Bill gets very big on nuclear plants. If they allow him, I am sure he won't have a problem building one. But you know, the country is not ready to build nuclear plants anywhere.
And you mentioned this, Tom. It's a great topic here about a derivative topic about AI and the energy demand. Bloomberg Intelligence has a 40-page deep dive, AI-driven energy demand outlook. Solar, gas, and batteries race to power AI revolution.
What's the sum of that, Anurag?
Wow.
It's at the end of the day, that remains one of the biggest bottlenecks for us, both the GPU shortage as well as electricity and power. And I think I'll tell you one thing. I go back 2008-9, everybody's talking about how the world is going to run out of oil and everything. In the next 2 years, the US capitalists figure out how to do fracking. I'm very confident we will figure something out in the next 3 to 5 years that's going to help us with this shortage in electricity.
Okay, can you call John Lazier up and figure out what to do here? I got to order, Vet Bill had a tantrum last night. Almost bit kennel fee.
I know.
Vet Bill needs the new 16 Pro Max.
Well, you're getting yours and a watch next week, right?
Yeah.
So you're a total all in.
Which watch you get?
The Pro with the what is the Ultra 2, the black with the titanium.
Does
the
it
black
tell time,
shiny one.
Does it even tell time?
I actually have never used one of those watches, but this is the first time I'm going to experiment with the bigger one.
Jesus, I don't know.
Okay. What's your? I mean, you don't do single
watch.
best.
I'm fine. I don't need to.
How do you respond, Anurag Rana, to the gloom, the breath of gloom right now on AI? It's healthy, right?
It is always healthy. We went through the same thing in the internet bubble when we had the 2000 crash, and after that 3 years nothing happened. But internet is still so much bigger. So we're going to go through massive amounts of ups and downs in the stocks moving up and down. But I think the build out is real.
The market lifted when Anurag talked. It's great. How he does it. Anurag Rana with us with Bloomberg Intelligence. For those in the terminal, go to Bloomberg Intelligence for not only that, but the podcast for Schneider as well. I'll try to look at the Schneider podcast and get that out on Twitter and LinkedIn if I can. green on the screen on a Friday. On Wednesday at 10 a.m., Paul, I had no idea we would be at this point on Friday.
No. And then
we've got a 2-day moonshot.
Yeah, and then we've got the Fed, next week here. So we're going to hear from the Fed. We'll hear some color, and the question is 25 or 50, and then we go on.
I'm going to suggest right now the market, Dow up 115 points, outperforming where futures were an hour ago. BitDog flat, 58,000, rounded up. And the yield, it's coming a little bit, but I'm sorry, 3.57% two-year yield speaks to this tension as the Fed decides next Wednesday. With our news in New York City, John Tucker.
All right, Tom, Paul, Lisa, machinists at Boeing have voted to go on strike. In a news conference after the vote, the union president, John Holden, revealed the results.
Our members rejected the contract by 94.6%, and they voted to strike by 96%.
This is the first walkout at Boeing since 2008. It's another setback for the aircraft maker, whose reputation and finances have been battered recently. Kamala Harris making a pitch to swing state voters as she heads back on the campaign trail.
I believe we owe it to the voters to have another debate.
Well, the vice president kicking off her post-debate blitz in Charlotte, North Carolina. Harris will be back in Pennsylvania today for 2 more back-to-back rallies. The Justice Department preparing criminal charges in connection with an Iranian hack that targeted Donald Trump's presidential campaign. Let's get more from Washington and Bloomberg's Steve Potisk.
The prospect of criminal charges comes as the Justice Department has raised alarms about aggressive efforts by countries, including Russia and Iran, to meddle in the presidential election. It was not immediately clear when the charges might be announced. Assistant Attorney General Matthew Olson, the Justice Department's top national security official, said in a speech Thursday Iran is making a greater effort to influence this year's election than it has in prior election cycles, and that Iranian activity is growing increasingly aggressive as this election nears. In Washington, Steve Potisk, Bloomberg Radio.
Elon Musk has labeled the Australian government fascist over proposed new laws to crack down on digital misinformation, in particular on social media websites. Under the proposed legislation, social media companies could be fined up to 5% of their annual revenue if they fail to take steps to manage the risks that misinformation and disinformation on digital communications platforms poses in Australia. And China going to raise the retirement age, a move likely to slow a decline in the labor force, but anger workers already wrestling with a slowing economy. Men's retirement age will increase from 60 to 63, while women's will rise from 50 and 55 to 55 and 58. This change will take place over 15 years. China, of course, the world's second largest economy behind the U.S. The UK's Police and Crime Minister, Dame Diana Johnson, delivered a speech to the Police Superintendents Association conference. She warned of an epidemic of antisocial behavior, theft, and shoplifting that the Labour government had inherited from the Conservatives. At that same police conference, she had her purse stolen. Global news, 24 hours a day, whenever you want it, with Bloomberg News Now. I'm John Tucker. This is Bloomberg. Paul, Lisa, Tom.
John, thanks so much. Big money football here. UConn traveling to Duke.
Sure.
The Fayetteville Observer has it. It was an agreement made in 2019. UConn gets a $300,000 guarantee from Duke for playing this weekend.
Yeah, why not?
So that's like you're the away team.
Yep.
And they negotiate, it could be more, but is that how it works?
I think so, yeah. For a lot of these, out-of-conference games, particularly the ones that maybe the bigger conference team, in this case Duke, want to get a little bit of a tune-up game, I'll be polite and call it that.
Before UNC, which is the only game that matters.
But how about Duke, UConn in basketball? That's what I'm looking forward to. Hopefully
that would be good. That would be a bigger guarantee.
Yeah, that would be big. I don't know who's guaranteeing who there. That's how good UConn
we will
is.
see. Dow up 100 points, S&P up 17 points. Little nice, good feel to the tape right now. This is Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
And now a look at some of the local headlines making news in the tri-state area.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. The world's biggest bond market revived thoughts of a half-point rate cut by the Fed next week, sparking a slide in Treasury yields gains in stocks. Swap traders currently pricing 40% chance of a 50 basis point reduction. So let's get to it. They have the 2-year yield 3.57%, down 6 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 3.66%, and that's down 1 basis point. We have the Nasdaq up 0.3%, the Dow up 0.4%, and the S&P 500 up 0.3%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Busy 15 minutes here to get to the 10 o'clock hour in Michigan statistics. I'm going to get right to it. David Samra joins us right now. And this is a really, really important conversation for everybody. 120% in U.S. equities. Going international hasn't worked since time began, but is now the time. With Artisan International Value, David Samra. What's changed in the last 6 months in this, the last decade's been painful. Now is the time for international. What's a change agent right now?
Well, I don't think there is a real change agent. I think that any long-term investment strategy requires discipline, and it requires, at least for us in the way that we approach it, an ability to identify securities that are mispriced. And I know that things haven't worked over the last decade or so for many international investors, but if you look at our performance, over the last 22 years since we've been in this business, we've actually been, and we're not alone in this, able to outperform the S&P 500, which is pretty remarkable if you consider that outside the U.S. you don't have Google, you don't have Apple, you don't have any of these big platform businesses. They just simply don't exist outside the United States.
He's underselling it. 3-year, 93rd percentile. 5-year, 92nd percentile.
Yeah, they're okay.
They've been doing okay. Continue.
Japan. This is just fascinating to me because when I started my career in the mid-'80s, Japan was the bomb. You had to go to Japan. You had to do a tour of duty there. You had to have a marketplace there. And then it went dormant for a generation. Why are Warren Buffett, why are people like you talking about Japan over the last couple of years?
Well, the corporate governance system in Japan has changed dramatically. Historically, it's been a backwater for corporate governance where, the board of directors was the chairman and the CEO were the same person, and all the other members of the board were management who owed their jobs to the chairman and CEO. And cross-shareholdings made it very difficult for others to penetrate that system. So outside investors had very little influence. That system is changing. It was started by former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, and that's continuing today. Even, one of the equities that we own, 7&I, is in the midst of receiving a takeover offer from a large Canadian company. This hasn't been seen before.
One of their huge holdings, and this I guess goes to Mr. Buffet and all, is insurance and specialty insurance. Tell us about the persistency of cash flows. I believe Mr. Buffet loaded up on Chubb, a local story in that, but tell us about Arch Capital Group and your focus on insurance.
Arch Capital is an amazing company, and we bought the stock way back in 2004 when it was capitalized with $1 billion. Today, the company has a book value of $13 billion and bought back about 40% of the shares outstanding. And that really comes down to discipline. Underwriting discipline is very important in that industry, and Buffett's organization, Berkshire Hathaway, symbolizes that, and so does Arch Capital, and that's how you create value.
David Harrow, obviously a great international investor, really challenging times.
And my former boss.
Yeah, I know that. But you're not a Packers fan.
I am not a Packers fan.
Okay, thank God for that. Okay, but anyways, weaned under David Harrow, who I adore, and he was a total class act as Credit Suisse blew up. But all of a sudden, I got, is it Orchel? What would Francine say?
Orchel. Yes, she corrected us yesterday.
UniCredit. And, Carol Masserdark in the door. We'll get to Carol in a moment. UniCredit and Commerce Bank. Finally, is it a Samra Harrow moment for European Bank? Finally, I say.
Well, the big moment was actually Colm Kelleher, who's the chairman of UBS, who swooped in over a weekend, a wintry weekend in March, and took over Credit Suisse at a handout price. That was the big moment that created an enormous amount of value, and anybody involved in UBS was able to profit handsomely
Where's UBS in
from
5 years, and where is Swiss banking in 5 years?
Well, I think UBS today is no longer undervalued. The value that was created by that transaction is now reflected in the share price, and so we think that it'll grow somewhere between 5 and 10% per year over the. But it's not. You're not gonna knock it out of the park at UBS at this price.
I got one more question because Master's here and people are looking at their watches. They're going like this.
I got a blowout waiting.
Sama, you don't own Deutsche Bank, or it's not visible.
I don't. Banks are terrible businesses.
When is Deutsche Bank going to get their act together? I was shocked how small it is versus BNP Paribas.
Yeah,
when does DBK get their act together?
I don't think it does. It's just too levered. It operates in tough businesses. It doesn't have a core retail franchise or a core wealth management franchise that can generate superior capital generation, and that's what it comes down to with banking.
The Milwaukee Brewers, I mean, they stole your manager. What was that about? Would Derek Jeter look good managing the Milwaukee Brewers?
I grew up in Boston, right? So I'm a Red Sox fan.
Yes.
I worked at Fenway Park.
Yes.
There are 11 games out this year.
What'd you do at Fenway?
Oh, I made pizza. I sold hot dogs.
Oh, a real job?
I had a real job there. Yeah, It was fantastic. But I don't pay that much attention anymore because I've discovered fishing, which is way more fun than sitting in front of the TV.
Did you sit there like me as a kid? Pumpsy Green was out in center field watching the old fat guy do the 2 Narragansett Lager beers, open them with his thumbs and pour them at the same time.
Oh, loved it.
What
loved
a gift. Mrs. Yawkey used to sit up there and go like this.
That's a
George
talent.
Scott was, one of my favorite players. El Tiante, all beautiful.
Mr. Tiante.
El
And
Tiante.
he's been great. Louis Tiante's been great.
Terrific.
And Fred Lynn with the new double knees. David Samra, don't be a stranger. With Artisan Partners Milwaukee.
Thank you both.
Great to have you in here. We digress. People called up, and I said, I really don't have the space. I got David Samra. She said, Jeter. I said, I got to take it. It's the only Yankee Red Sox fans like Carol Masser the honor of speaking to one of the Yankees yesterday.
Can I just say, what a super nice guy. You guys talk to athletes, we all do, but this guy, just super, super nice from the minute he walked in, curious about our world, just had questions for us, and we could kind of go anywhere. I have to tell you, he has no interest, though, at least he says at this point, in owning an MLB team. Although he said, never say never, you never know.
Well, he
down
did the
road.
Miami thing, right?
Yeah.
And I interviewed him with a leading creditors something, and it was a struggle, right?
Well, yeah, and the thing is, he said he's got 4 kids, I think, under the age of 7. He said he's got a bunch of little critters right now, and he said that's his focus right now, and so that is what his attention is. Having said that, he was with the founder of Untuckit, Chris Riccobono, and very interesting. They're doing this new athletic wear brand. He's very involved. It's not just here's some money, figure it out. He said kind of no initially. He had to be kind of wooed, if you will, and he's in on this.
So I thought you guys were really interesting talking to him about they're going into a competitive business. This athleisure wear, I'm not sure kind of how they really want to position it. You got the Nikes of the world and Under Armours of the world. I guess they're just looking for their little slice of that big, huge business.
Viore, they're looking for a slice. It's a massive market. It's expected to, I think, nearly double in the next few years. So listen, I was doing the interview in yoga pants that were pilling, and he said our stuff doesn't pill.
We don't do. I have never done an interview. Rich, take a note. I've never done an interview in yoga pants.
Okay, but if you do, please let us know. No, but having said that, I think they think about the celebrity aspect of it. They've got Misty Copeland getting involved with the female side of the business. You need people to be wearing it, and that's what gets other consumers on board. So, your family, daughters, wife, they wear a fair amount of, athletic wear.
Are you kidding me? The packages, 3 packages came in yesterday.
Yeah.
I don't even know where this stuff comes from. Mrs. Keene stopped me, and she was watching yesterday the first Beetlejuice.
I know.
Just to get up to speed.
I haven't seen the movie yet.
Paul, jump in here.
I know.
44 million. This is like a post-Labor Day shock.
It is. For the first one did great, and now we've got the successor you're going to be speaking with the screenwriter of it, right? Today?
We have the screenwriters. Yep, absolutely. I think what's interesting is you bring back, I don't know whether it's nostalgia or something, right? You bring back a group of actors. We've seen this movie before. We're curious about, it's been a while since the original one.
Michael Keaton. Right?
Yeah, and so to see some success, because we know the box office has been struggling in a big way. Yeah, kind of interesting stuff.
Tell me about Bloomberg Business Week. I mean, it's on fire right now. I mean, they had the Trump interview.
They drink wine
and all that.
Fun.
College.
We have a whiskey guest.
Of course you do.
Although no samples today.
How come, Rich? How come we don't have a whiskey guest? Is it too early in the
Well,
morning?
it's like 9:56 in the morning. No, it's fun. It's a good snapshot of our world, just like you guys do.
College football players learn an ugly truth about getting paid. That's a lead right now for Bloomberg Business Week.
Yeah, we're going to tap into that, right? Like, we feel like the floodgates have opened up, but you wonder what it all means.
Carol, Tim, Bloomberg Business Week in the afternoons. We're really going to look forward to that. I need to frame out this into the weekend because it's totally different than where I thought we would be Wednesday.
Right.
We have a legitimate, Anna Wong had out, not her story at 6 a.m. this morning, but like 14 hours ago, whatever. She had a story saying, look, the indecision here of 25 or 50 beeps is untenable. And she literally said on Monday, they will clarify, and I thought Mike McKee was great on that, through the media, whatever. Carol Massar will get a phone call from Mr. Powell, whatever. Yep. But they got to clarify what's going on. This is not a normal Fed process. In this meeting, the Fed decides Wednesday, September 18th, is not normal, Paul.
But you guys will be on tap. Michael McKee will be down in Washington, D.C. We'll send him down on the Acela train bright and early.
Yeah.
But again, I think people want to get a sense of if you do go to 50 or if you don't, even if you stay at 25, what's really your view of this economy? Are you on top of this soft landing approach here, or could it get a little bumpy when we touch down?
Okay.
I think people are looking for some rhetoric that'll kind of guide you that way.
Paul, nobody cares. I just got up on the T-Mobile website for the phone.
Yep.
Do I need 1 terabyte of storage? Anurag, I think, said no.
Well, I mean,
why not?
He's a big cloud guy. He's a big cloud guy. He puts it all up there in the cloud. But he's tech savvy. I'm not sure, where you want to go, Tom.
It took pay monthly, it says.
Yeah.
Oh, what a shot. Pay in full. Look at the price of the thing.
What is it?
This is just a basic phone. $1,500.
No, it's not.
With a 1 terabyte, I think with a 1 terabyte bill.
Here we go. All right.
That's a lot of money.
But maybe I'll get something on a trade-in.
I get a trade-in. I looked up the price. The phone I have.
Yeah, I think they're going to give me like $15 or something for mine.
Tucker. They're going to pay him. They're so
just go away. Just throw it away.
It's been a wonderful, wonderful week. We thank all of you for all the feedback we're getting here. Let me frame it out again. Our distribution in the car, Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, in the corridor from 99.1 Washington up to Bloomberg 1130 in New York, and Good Morning 92.9 FM in Boston. A particular good morning to Katy Kaminski at AlphaSimplex, who was really brilliant on the markets earlier. Emily Roland at John Hancock as well. Across this nation, when you get to the office, to the living room, whatever, YouTube on Bloomberg Podcast. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. The Dow up 240 Alex Steele points.